right, we are now good to go. Sorry for keeping you waiting. Welcome everybody to the regular school committee meeting of February 25th, 2015. Calling the meeting to order at 6:21. First item is we're going to jump right into new business and get to the reason why some of you are here anyway, so you don't have to stay too late. And that is for the 2015-2016 calendar recommendation from the calendar committee. Who's going to take that away?
I'll start.
Okay.
I'm Monica Disco. We had a very robust committee this year. We had 5 parents participate, most of them from Stowe and Bolton. But many of the members of the committee are here, so I'd like them to introduce themselves, if that's okay.
Michelle Kelly.
Alana Sear.
Jake Carter. Yeah, Patrick.
Can you just say where you're from, where you work?
High school. English.
Lord Sawyer.
Florence Sawyer. Florence Sawyer.
Carol S. Shambo, teaching and learning.
Martina Kenyon, teaching and learning.
Laura Dwyer, teaching and learning.
Kelly Rogers, center school. Kelly Bravo, parent.
Okay.
Thank you, all of you, for all the work you do.
So we came up with this draft of the calendar. This is our recommendation. We had a lot of great discussions. The start date for kids would be September 2nd. Start date for staff would be August 31st. The first 2 full PD days of the year would be August 31st and September 1st. We struggled mightily with the November week, the week of November 9th. With the holiday being right in the middle of the week, we tried to utilize that week for additional time off for parent-teacher conferences. And believe me, we looked at all different kinds of ways to not have it be that disruptive, but with the holiday being right in the middle of the week, this was our recommendation. In this version of the calendar, there are 180 school days, 184 days for teachers and instructional assistants, 185 days for first-year teachers. There are 4 non-instructional days for instructional staff, 1 full parent-teacher conference, 3 full PD days. Early release, there are 6 early release professional development days and 3 early release parent-teacher conference days. According to the contract, work days cannot start more than 1 week prior to Labor Day. We do thankfully have better new language. Did I say better? We have new language in the collective bargaining agreement about the spring parent-teacher conferences, so we were able to schedule those more easily. Federal and state holidays have to be observed, and they're recognized in this version of the calendar. We looked at MCAS dates. We tried to keep as many full instruction weeks as we could. We have a few recommendations that aren't yet reflected here. Our late starts for the high school. I know that Dr. Graham wanted to, and we did talk about this with the committee, have late starts for more collaborative professional development time. He had to go back and examine hours that the students were going to be in school to meet the state requirements, and then was going to have a discussion with the superintendent. So that's something that's still in process that the calendar committee's fully supported. We also had the request that the calendar be updated as snow days occur, and that we add report cards to the report card dates to the calendar, which is something hopefully we'll be able to do. So that's the placement of the early release professional development days. A lot of discussion about that. We tried to make it easier for parents, for people who work full-time, to have the younger children covered. We talked about the enrichment program, the extended learning program as an available resource for full PD and early release days. But if there are any questions, we have plenty of resources here to answer them for you.
Questions? Go ahead, Kathy.
The only question I had was about the late starts, because we had heard from the teachers, we heard from the NEAS report the need for professional development time, collaboration time more than anything, just to get caught up with all the new initiatives. So what does that mean? So if this is the recommendation, will you overlay that if you can
Yeah.
figure it out with Perry?
Right, so we'll probably complete that before your next, you're looking at it tonight and you'll vote next meeting presumably. So with that, you'll hear what my recommendation is for late starts and PD time in general for pre-K through 8 as well.
Okay. And I just want to say thank you. Like, it's always a challenge because I know everyone says we want to start in September, but we want to get out early in July. It's almost like you did that. So, you did this year. You just go.
You're welcome. I just wanted to clarify, is the late start concept is only for the high school?
Yes, it has been only for the high school. They've had it during midterm week, and I think that is on here.
Yes, it is.
Yes, during midterm week. But Dr. Graham did talk about having more.
He just walked in.
late- I was glad he was here. More late starts for collaboration. And the overwhelming sentiment from the parents on the committee was that that's okay for the older kids, but it's really problematic for the younger kids.
And so you think that you'll be able to include that on the calendar before we have to approve it?
Yes. Yes, the late starts.
Yes.
Yep, he's been able, yeah, it's been confirmed that we can do it and cover all of the hours that kids are required to be in class.
And that would be the case because the schedule rotates, so it would make sure that those late start days would hit on different blocks, correct?
Well, you have to reach a total number of 990 instructional hours.
Right.
So in one of my fancy spreadsheets, I calculated how many minutes of instruction we have with taking out the late starts for midterms, late starts for finals. I think I built in 8 early release days. And then if we did an additional 3 late starts per quarter, so the number I was looking at was like 3 late starts, so 12 over the course of the year, which would give us like 24 hours of collaborative time. That would still get us to the 990 instructional hours. We currently have more than 990 instructional hours. We're currently like 1,012, 1,015, something like that.
Okay. But that, we would have to pay attention to the rotation, right, to make sure we weren't hitting that same class.
Yes. I mean, in my head, it would be, like the same day every 3 weeks, but I haven't gotten to that point of detail
Okay.
since it is still very speculative. But yes, we want to make sure that we weren't hitting the same period.
Right.
And what we do on late starts right now is that each period meets and we shrink the amount of time per period. So we could do it a bunch of different ways. On early releases, we only have a certain number of periods meet, and they meet for about their full length of time. So there are a variety of different ways we can accommodate that. It could either be we keep the same length of time per period and just have fewer periods meet and make sure we're staggering it appropriately, or it could be that every class meets and they meet for a smaller length of time. So a variety of ways that we could approach that.
And this November thing, committee, all due respect, I know you toiled over it, but a day off and then a half a day for the kids. A day off and then a half a day and then another day off. And you're not worried about kids not showing up on that half a day.
Well, we certainly recognize that that was a possibility. I mean, but we talked about moving those days to closer to the Thanksgiving break, but then we worry about parents taking their kids away for the full week and extending that vacation. So, I mean, you really can't, this is our best version to avoid breaking up full weeks as much as we could. And I mean, parent-teacher conferences, especially early on, are pretty popular, and we're hoping that parents will attend. I mean, most of the staff on the committee talked about they're usually fully scheduled for parent-teacher conferences, so it's not like they've seen people take off to extend their
But
weekend.
this is a little different, this off and on and off concept.
I think the idea too is that it didn't disrupt 2 other weeks. So, you know what I mean? So the
Just
2
have one
other
bad
weeks
week,
each on
yeah.
either
Right.
side were full weeks, and it's really great to have those 5 days as opposed to, you know, instead of having that week be broken, then the next week we have a vacation day,
Yeah.
and then Thanksgiving 2 weeks later, just from a teaching standpoint, it's just, I think having 1 week kind of ruined
Yeah.
is better to have the other 2 kind of consistent.
Okay.
And the working parents on the committee talked about their preference to have a Friday with no school than a Monday with no school. So we did toss it from one end to the other end of the week to try to see which would work better. But the consensus was this was the cleanest disaster.
Also great to know, yeah. Any other questions? No?
Well, it's been in the newspapers, we've had a lot of snow. And one of the things, two things that I want to mention. One is just a reminder for this year, but all years in our calendar, we do publish when the last day will be with 5 snow days. And that's an important day to note because we have to. But it's really more important to know for parents and for staff that sometimes we go over the 5 days. And that vacations should not be planned immediately within that time frame because we just don't know. We have depending on when those days get used, we have other alternatives. We have the February break and we have the April break to use to reschedule if we are able to, and the school committee so decides. But oftentimes, to keep our options open, we have the rest of June as well. So that's something that I want to have people keep in mind as they look at the calendar. The other thing is that the Commissioner of Education is certainly, because of the number of snow days and the trials and tribulations that many districts are going through right now, is reminding schools and school committees to, school administrators, school committees to really look at the possibility of combining the 2 breaks to see if that's a way to preempt what might be a 1 in 7 year occurrence, but nonetheless be conscious of the fact that you may be out in June even if you had more than 5 snow days.
Is there, in your peer group, has this winter encouraged more of that discussion?
Definitely.
Thank God. I would love to hear where that went. Did you folks get the MASC survey? Did you fill it out? You did? Mm-hmm. There's a survey that they sent out on what's your district doing as far as...
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are talking about it. It's a difficult conversation. It's a third rail, and so I don't think people are jumping onto the bandwagon in our state. Taunton is the only district that has eliminated, and the current calendar has a March vacation, and so they made the jump.
Really? I didn't know that.
Rhode Island, I believe, for next year is making the jump as a state. So
That's crazy.
it's definitely becoming a hard topic with the weather. It's pushing the topic to be in the forefront.
Was it something that calendar committee?
We talk about it every year.
Yeah.
This year was the most positive discussion around that idea. We weren't quite brave enough to push it forward, but I think that the committee in general, next year we might be ready. They weren't, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, they didn't totally hate the idea, but,
Right.
they didn't also want to.
Not totally.
Not totally.
Working parents like the idea.
Working parents did like the idea.
Liked the
Yeah.
idea?
I mean, we don't get that much time off.
Right.
It's hard to balance
Right.
that and the half days.
And again, this is a rare winter, but I'm sure it's been very difficult for working parents with the number of snow days that not only in our district, but across the Commonwealth. You know, some districts are up to 8 or 9 days now. And that's, how do you manage that? That's really tough.
So this is it, the sole recommendation, correct?
We don't have two this year, right, this is it, the
For
sole
the past
recommendation.
Several years we've had options, but this is,
I like having one, I think.
I like having one too.
This is it. This is it, with the full understanding, and we talked about it at the onset of the committee, that the ultimate, the adopted calendar may not look exactly like this, and that's understood.
Or sort of visually looking at it, I like to see how much white there is. You know, I mean, that there are a lot of full weeks. And
July and August, there's tons of white.
no, but I mean, even, you know, I mean, September and October are sometimes so choppy, and I always found that really frustrating. So it's nice to see how many full weeks you were able to maintain and still give a not a huge amount of professional development, but a reasonable amount of PD in the fall.
And is this a stupid question, but in March, why are we 2 separate weeks on the parent conferences?
Well, that's the new language in the collective bargaining agreement, they have to be a week apart. That's better.
That's this year too, right?
It is.
And why would it be Thursday and Friday and not 2 Fridays?
Those are the evenings, I think, right?
The evening on the 10th.
Again, part of the
Friday
agreement.
Well, Friday evening conferences are not generally popular with staff or parents.
Okay, okay,
Yes, one is usually evening, one is usually an afternoon.
yeah, okay. Nobody else has questions? So we will talk about it with people and reconvene and vote on it at our next meeting. Is that reasonable? Is that what we were all expecting?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Serving
you.
the committee.
All right, moving along. Next item, as no surprise, under new business, is the overview of the financial impact of the proposed FY16 budget. And I will turn it over to Michael, George.
Yes, so we obviously talked about the expenditures a lot at our workshop, and revenue is an important part of the picture as well. I think it was before the meeting actually started, we kind of made the offhand comment that, you know, the state has not, the governor has not made his proposal yet for his budget. He'll do that on March 4th. You know, if we believe the media, there is certainly some, you know, news that the state government has other deficits that are in the works for the FY16, their FY16 proposal that they'll have to address. Right now, we are looking very carefully at that, but we won't know more until March 4th. But there is really the other pieces of the revenue, which are our revolving accounts, our offsets, and I thought it would be helpful for George to go through that and talk about that. He's written a white paper that's in your packet. We'll make that available to folks so that you can understand that. So I'll hand it over to George.
Is that something that would be helpful for them to have now, or not possible?
I think George needs to walk through it first.
Right, so as Michael said, there's been a lot of talk about our funding sources and how we manage our reserve funds, so to speak. So I did put this together so that we could at least try to capture it and contrast it with some of the concerns of the towns. So each year, the majority of our budget is funded by our member towns, about 80% of our budget overall. The balance is funded through district funding sources that we call local funds, which includes our state aid, Chapter 70 appropriation. The ones that seem to garner the most discussion, because they're a little bit more variable in terms of the amounts used, are our large fund, relatively speaking, local controlled funds such as our excess and deficiency balance, our E&D account. The special ed circuit breaker is a big one, though. It's pretty clear cut how much it is each year. The school choice tuitions, and then some other additional program funding from time to time we talk about. So one of the key things whenever you're spending money like that's not on coming in like taxes or assessments or something like that, is to make sure it's at least as consistent as it possibly can be. So the two areas that I think have the most impact is their size, our excess and efficiency, and school choice revenues, because they've been a relatively significant part of our revenue the last couple of years. So first of all, our E&D is a regional school district equivalent of free cash. Towns call it free cash, school districts, it's called E&D, excess and deficiency. Very simply, that is essentially the money we have left over at the end of the fiscal year. It's not exactly that, but that's a good layman's expression of it. We're limited. Towns are not limited. Towns can have as much free cash certified each year as they choose. It's a local policy decision. Regional school districts are limited to 5% of their budget. So in other words, we can't have more than, in this case, approximately $2.5 million in E&D on hand. If we do, if we're certified with more than $2.5 million, we have to give it as a credit against the next assessment bill that goes out to our member towns. So the school district is limited. Anything above 5% we put back to the member towns automatically. Vote or anything like that, which will automatically return. In recent years, I'd say, I don't have the rate exactly, but 5-6 years at least, we've been certifying just about over $2 million each year and using $1 million in our budget each year. So in other words, on July 1st for this budget, July 1st, 2014, that closed out June 30th, 2014, we closed out and we certified 2 million plus of free cash. This budget recommends $1 million of that amount of money to be used. So $1 million would be used, $1.2 million would be kept in reserve. Okay. Over the years, people have said, well, you were talking about this earlier in the finance committee meeting. Well, you start out with $2.2 million and you end up around that the next year, and that has been the case. And I would argue that's what is good about the way we've managed it. We've managed it consistently, so we continue to pretty much use the funding that reoccurs, essentially. And that funding reoccurs from things we often can't predict. Maybe a salary surplus, maybe an insurance surplus, maybe a revenue surplus. That's what goes into the E&D at the end of the year. We haven't recommended going much above $1 million for several reasons. One I just stated is the main one. It's been a consistent, form of revenue. Frankly, it may not be anymore after this year because of some of the challenges we're facing this fiscal year, where we are right now. You never know, but there's a reasonable chance we may see a notable decrease in our certification at the end of this fiscal year. So it does not look like our revenues and surpluses are as significant as they have. Not that they've been that significant, but are at the same level as they have been. Other reason I think it's important that we keep, from a good financial management point of view, especially learning from our history, all remembering, what happened to this very school district 10 to 15 years ago, is E&D is really our only undesignated reserve for the entire situation. So we have a $50 million budget, and really the only undesignated reserve we have is the $1 million we don't appropriate or so in E&D. It'd be like living on a $1 million salary in the private sector, in your personal life, and having $50,000 in the bank or something like that, or $20,000 in the bank, a week's paycheck. That's it. So we don't really have that much money. Sounds like a lot of money, $1 million, but if you look at our overall operation, that's really our only reserve. So notwithstanding what I just said, namely just from natural occurrences this year, it looks like our E&D certification at this point, I would project, will be less than $2 million at the end of this year. If we were to spend, say, $1.4 million in this budget, out of the 2.2 million we have now, which would be a nice fix in a lot of people's minds, I understand. That virtually guarantees next year, when we certify our E&D, it would be substantially lower. Both because I know where our surpluses and things are right now, plus the fact that if you use 4,400,000 more, that 400,000 would not be in that base to recertify. So instead of having 1 million, a little bit over 1 million carrying forward, we have about 700,000 carrying forward. So the next E&D certification would be somewhere around 700,000 plus our surplus of revenues and extra money left over. Say that ended up, in the mid-teens of 1.3 or $4 million. Next year, if you use half of that, like we're doing now as a revenue, you'd only be using $700,000, and or maybe less. That would be another revenue shortfall. So in other words, we'd be going from 1.4 million this year to maybe 700,000 next year. So that would cause substantial increase in our assessment before we even look at any increases for next year or anything like that. So it's a little complicated, but it's really a balancing act of a scale. Right now, we've found the equilibrium. If we spend a lot more, I think the tip is going to go the wrong way, and we're going to not have as much to spend in the future, and that's going to impact the assessment. It can't go the other way, or it can't go much the other way. The towns don't have to worry. We can't have much more than this, and we haven't had much more than this. It's been very consistent. So it's not like we're, squirreling money away, so to speak, like from time to time people might think we are. We can't. It's not legal. You'll automatically give it back to the towns if it goes much higher. So the only way it can really go is lower.
In that account?
In the Indian account.
We can't put any more in that account?
We don't put anything in it, but we can't certify much more in that account.
Okay.
It incrementally goes each year, as our budget goes up to 5%, figure it would go up slightly, but we're talking very small amounts of money. Right, so it's been, in the 4.5 to 5 range for the last 5 or 6 years, which I think, I would argue, is a good range for it to be in. Because again, it's our only undesignated reserve. So the other area that we've been spending a lot of money in is school choice. We've had up as much as $1.3 million as a revenue. We know that's going to go down because we made a change in the policy. And this year, the recommended budget is down to $1.1 million. But as I mentioned at the last meeting, just briefly, a history of the school choice. Back up until 2008 or so, we were sending more students out than students in, so it wasn't much of an issue. Starting in 2008, we started to have a bit of a surplus each year. The first year or two, it wasn't much money. It was just $100,000, $200,000. And what we did was we just put that in the school choice revolving fund, which is how you have to treat all school choice money. All school choice money has to go into your school choice revolving fund and then be used out of the school choice revolving fund. So the first few years of this, we did not, 2008, 2009, 2010, we did not use much of that money as part of the budget. I believe we just offset our school choice costs with it. So after a period of time, we tried to get that revolving fund to the point where it had at least at the beginning of the fiscal year the amount of money that we were going to spend in that fiscal year. In other words, that's the way we like to do it with our revolving funds. We've had the balance on July 1st be the money we're going to spend that fiscal year. So whatever we had budgeted to spend that fiscal year, we would have hoped to have collected. The idea is spending money we already earned as opposed to spending money as we earn it. And that's the philosophy we have followed pretty well. We're no longer there with school choice because of the change in the policy. And even the recommendation of $1.1 million this year is a little bit high in that we are chipping away at that revolving fund. The $1.3 million this year chips away at it. The 1.1 next year will chip away at it, which is what we generally talked about doing in order to smooth the transition away to the new policy. But over the next couple of years, that our school choice revolving fund, I estimate by next July 1st will probably be about $600,000. In the fall, and after the fiscal year budget that we're voting on now is adopted and spent, I believe our school choice revolving fund will be down around $300,000. So that some odd million dollars of balance will be pretty much gone by next year, and we'll just have to probably pretty much spend whatever the delta is each year. It looks like we're going to be $500,000 in the good. That's what we'll spend, and that's what we'll budget. We'll have to project that. The only problem with that is it's a little bit it's a little bit hard to project, because right now I can't, I mean, I have a general idea what the delta will be next year, but I don't know for a fact. So the uncertainty gets a little bit higher, but we still certainly will be able to use the money. So I guess those two funds which garnered a lot of attention, I guess I would say E&D, I think we spend the maximum we should, and I think for good reasons we spent that amount, and I think we can continue to evaluate it each year, but we have a ceiling, so no one has to worry about us putting too much away. School choice is taking care of itself for the reasons I just explained, partially just the change in the policy. Mainly just the change in the policy. So then, looking back at the history, you know, how we get here, this is the biggest budget increase, even though it's only 5%, which some people I know think only is a bad word, but we had larger increases in my tenure here in the first couple of years. We were in the 6 and 7% range. But that changed with the fiscal crisis of 2008. When the fiscal crisis occurred in the fall of 2008, we were at that time, we were in fiscal year 2009 already, and we were preparing at that time our fiscal year 2010 budget in the fall of 2008. Much like, in the fall of 2014, we began preparation of this budget, which is the fiscal year 2016 budget. So realizing the towns had to stabilize their finances and the economy was bad, and we all remember, right? Over those 3 years, from fiscal year 2010 to 2012, our budget increases were 1.46%, 0.1%, and 2.1%. So therefore, the average budget increase over that 3-year period was 1.22% over a 3-year period. Those budgets, of course, were not sustainable for the school district, but they did allow our member towns the opportunity to recover financially and not, have to be concerned about what we're doing, what they're concerned with now, I guess. And also during that period of time, because we were in good, solid financial shape, we had a good E&D balance, our school choice reserve was reasonable, our program reserves, our kindergarten, our extended day, our preschool, which are our biggest ones, reserve accounts, had their annual tuition in there, so to speak, before we spent it. The state was looking favorably at how we were managing our money. We went from being under a state control board to one of the fiscally healthiest school districts in the Commonwealth. One thing that the 2002 legislation required was that we set up a reserve fund. We had to fund it every year until we had 1.5% of our budget in this reserve fund. It was incrementally funded from 2003 or so on. And it got up to $600,000.
What was it for?
And it was just required to have a reserve fund as part of the 2002 legislation when the state authorized the $5 million in deficit bonds.
And it's above and beyond all this stuff.
Yeah, right, exactly. Above and beyond everything else, they required that we have that special reserve fund, so we, if anything happened like it happened to them previously, there'd be a reserve. That was part of the problem.
Did you have to check with them to spend it?
I'll get to that. There is, so I wasn't here obviously for the difficult times, but, and I don't mean to make it simple because it wasn't, but to make it as simple as I can, they spent more money than they had. So therefore, that's why the state wanted to have a reserve fund in place. So yes, you could have spent money out of that reserve fund as a school committee, the way I understand it, after the state control board left. But you still would have been obligated during the fiscal year, at the end of the fiscal year, to bring it up to the level that was required by legislation. And that went up each year. It was like 1.25%, 1.5%, until we got to 1.5%. So we had it up to that range, in the high $500,000 range. But we went to the state after discussions with the school committee, those of you who are on it may remember, we went to the state and said, look, it's tough times. We have the $600,000 reserve fund. We're in good shape now. We have E&D. We have school choice revolving fund. Our program funds are in good shape. We think we should be allowed to extinguish this fund. We had to file special legislation to do so, and we needed the support of the Department of Local Services to do so, and otherwise the legislature wasn't going to let us do it. We did that. We successfully got that legislation passed to free up that $600,000, and we used that as the legislation allowed us to do over a 4-year period to offset our assessments. So again, we took a reserve and spent it to offset the assessments. So if you look at our history, the idea is somehow we have so many reserves that we're not spending, I don't think is really an accurate view of the history. I understand sometimes with the numbers are big why it seems that way. So that gets us to this year's proposal, which is a 5% increase. Like I said, this is the largest proposed increase, though I don't think it's outrageously large as a number. It's the largest proposed increase we've had in 8 years. it seems like the economy is a little bit more robust at this point, but we have needs that this year, go ahead and finish, or answer a question?
Well, I don't want to forget, the years that you're going up, and you're saying we only went up 1.46%.
Yes.
Does that, are those the years that we used the reserve fund?
Some of them were, I don't know if all of them were, I think they were. I think we used them, I don't remember exactly what it was. I have not, at least 2 of them, I believe, were years that we used the reserve fund.
So when you do that, would you actually include that in the percentage, or would that not be counted because we already have the money?
Right, that would be the local revenue I talked about.
I know,
Actually, no, I'm
when you do
sorry.
percentages.
Thank you, no. It doesn't matter, it's not pertinent.
Well, it is if you're saying that we were really low.
No,
and
no.
you actually had more money in there.
That's what I'm saying. It's not pertinent. It is pertinent to how much we assess. It's not pertinent to the budget. Those were the budget increase numbers. It wasn't the spending, it was a budget increase. Regardless of how we spent it, regardless of where the revenue came from, that's how much our budget went up.
And that budget included those numbers.
No, it's not relative to that. That was an increase in the budget. So, our proposal this year, one of the things that's hurting our budget this year, frankly, is a large increase in our special ed costs that are essentially not controlled by the district. That's almost, it's incorrect here, it's a typo here, it says 35%. It's about 30% of the budget increase this year. So our 5% budget increase, if we weren't, didn't have those costs, it would be a 3.5% increase. It's frustrating for all of us. But I would point out, these are the costs that are budget busters for a lot of districts every year. This is the first time in at least 12 years that this has been a problem for us. It's a challenge, but it's not, we have very minimal control over these costs. And it's one of the main drivers above our normal costs. So we are in a situation that's a little unique. So we are going to the towns asking for more money than we have in recent years. And before we did that, I think we had to look at our own house, show that we spent the reserves that we can spend, show why this budget is going up. Looking at our towns, I think what we tried to do for our towns over the last several years worked. We've allowed our towns to get into a little bit better financial shape. All 3 towns, and it's technical, but it's critical, have increased their excess capacity over the last 5 years by almost, the minimum was just under $500,000 in Lancaster, Bolton by $500,000, and Stowe by $1.1 million. What that means is they taxed under their Proposition 2.5 limit by that amount of money. So they all did not have, most towns, not most, often towns spend the whole 2.5 levy every year. Our towns did not have to do it over those 5 years, and they've been able to put tax capacity in the bank, which is good financial planning on their part, and it's their biggest expenditure was coming in less than 2.5%. I mean, one would hope they would do that, and they did do that. All our towns also have reserves. They have free cash reserves. Bolton has just about $1 million in free cash, Stowe almost $2 million. Lancaster, we did not have a certification for FY15 yet, but they had almost $600,000 last year. We have reason to believe it's going to be larger this year. Again, all our towns have been able to have a healthy stabilization fund balance. So our towns have been able to recover and stabilize financially a little bit, based a lot on the fact that we, over that period of time, did not assess them as much as we may have otherwise. If you look at the percentage of the budgets we take into towns, if you look using their tax recap sheet, if you look at their total appropriation in FY10 versus their total appropriation in FY15, in 2 of our 3 towns, we're a lesser piece of their pie than we were 5 years ago.
That's not correct, George, because I spoke with Bob Sikansky this afternoon, and the number you picked, I don't have all the details, but the number you picked didn't include a lot of borrowing, which we do recently. So that is not correct. Actually, the percentage of our town budget that's going to the schools has gone up consistently. So that is not correct. I'd be more than happy to get Bob in, but that's not correct.
But every town has to file a recap sheet at the end of the year. And the first line of the recap sheet is the total amount appropriated for the town for that year. If you take that number, and I don't know what other number one would take, but the number off the tax recap sheet, that's all I can do is take that number. That's the number you file with DOR. So I don't know why you file a different number, but that's the number you file with DOR. If you base that, and that's all I can base it on what you file with DOR. So we can certainly discuss it, but
absolutely.
But that's all I can. Bolton has pretty much stayed the same. Lancaster has actually went down about 4%, and Stowe has went up a bit, but Stowe's population has went up also significantly over that period. The other two towns are pretty close to even. Stowe's population is up 11% over those 5 years. So the conclusion is, certainly the needs of the district are greater than they have been in recent years. Most of the excess need, above that 3.5% range, is driven by mandated special education costs in which we have minimal control. As I stated a few minutes ago, this item has been managed very well by this district for more than a decade, but like other districts, from time to time, these become a budget buster. We can't control a lot of it. If someone moves in or something like that, we just can't control that. So the point I think I'm trying to make, is during the economic crisis time, the district, made minimal requests to the towns while still trying to maintain and successfully doing so our fiscal health and our product, which is probably the most important thing. Now we hope the towns are in a little bit of position. We understand it's a bit of an inconvenience to them to help the district meet our needs in a year that's difficult for us. And I think we want to show that we have used our reserves to the extent that we can and we feel is prudent. The only reserve really left for discussion would be our E&D account, and I think we would show using much more of that would not be prudent. And so we've really tried to spend some time over the last couple of weeks to look at the entire fiscal picture, both of the district and our member towns, and why these issues are occurring, and why we feel this is, not stating it's done that we can't talk about. I know Michael is going to talk about some aspects of it tonight, but why we feel the budget request is at least reasonable. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee for George?
I have a question.
Yep.
You just said that you've been fiscally responsible and you have not increased, yet you've increased the product.
I don't think I said that. I said we had small increases during that period of years, but despite the small increases, I don't think we acted imprudently. We maintained the fiscal health of the district while I think maintaining our product. In other words, we did not cut major programs. We did not deteriorate the product, the education of our students during the period of time. So that's what I meant to say. I didn't say that.
Well, the only measure of success that we have currently is MCAS. And this
I disagree.
I totally disagree.
I completely disagree with
It's the
that.
only thing I have. What do we have to measure?
Well, that's if you're looking for a number. What about all the other stuff? What about all of our kids who are gone through our system and are really thriving in college now?
In our 5-year plan, none of that's on there. All that's on there is MCAS.
That's not the only
That's
thing on our
That's not the only thing on the plan at all.
I totally
Tons of stuff on our
We're getting
plan.
off track though, a
No.
little bit, right? I mean, you be the chair, but I think I want to talk about this if we could. And we don't have a lot of time, so.
Good.
I don't mean to shut you down, but.
No,
Does anybody else have, sorry, because I
Yes, Lorraine.
well, I'd like to hear from Kathy and Nicole and you and Maureen, frankly.
Well,
Before
so
I have anything to add.
right now, we're having questions for George based on this presentation.
Right.
And then we're going to move to discussion, and I want to hear from everybody at the table, their opinions. So I don't really want opinions now, but I want questions now.
Well, that's what I mean.
Okay.
So, are you guys good with this? Okay, so, first of all, I really appreciate you putting this together. Because last week, George and Michael and Nicole and I met because I had some specific questions, and they are all in this document. So I really appreciate you doing that. I do have a couple of things. I didn't see it on, I don't know when it went in the packet. I didn't see it until this afternoon, so I tried to make some quick questions for you, George. First of all, if we're using $1 million of E&D this year, which we know is going to replenish, we don't know yet what degree that will replenish, but we know that every year we have excess at the end of the year that gets, well,
Not by-
historically, no?
Historically, well, for the last 12 years.
Oh, well,
If you just read the last warrants with the snow removal, it's like those kind of numbers are where you end up maybe with less of an excess.
perhaps.
As an
This is
example.
But
a count.
historically, every year, we've had access to move into E&D, right? Okay. So this year, we're gonna take $1 million out of that, and at some point, it will replenish to a certain degree. But if we're taking $1 million out, which represents roughly 2% of the existing budget, then are we not truly asking for or putting forth a request for 7% increase, but we're gonna help offset it with 2%, because isn't then next year, when we turn around and we go through this effort again, it's not based on the 5% increase, it's based on actually a 7% increase, which this year we've offset with $1 million. Is that true?
No, because the budget itself is only going up 5%. So that the expending is only increasing 5%.
But the spending may be, what you're passing on to the towns is the 5%, no?
The
So
$1 million,
I-
$1 million.
But I understand what Lorraine's saying, is we're helping offset. So what we're asking for
We're asking for
is
90.
is offset by something we're getting revenue to replenish. Like, I understand the
Yeah, I understand
concept.
what
And
you're
we've
saying.
been doing that better for the last 3 years to help the towns, even though we might, you know what I mean? Because
Right.
we've asked for less. We've tried to be more fiscally conservative, and we've tried to offset using funds we could pull from something.
Well, two things. Generally, that's correct, okay? But we've used $1 million in recent years, so it's really a wash, okay?
But doesn't the next year, isn't what we're basing our budget on, that, what this year's budget is, plus the 5%, plus the 2% from the million that we're,
Well, if you think about your own checkbook, and you always keep in $1,000.
we talked about this.
You know what I mean? If you always keep that $1,000, your budget for next year doesn't include that $1,000, because that's just reserve. That's just in case you get in a car accident and you need to replace your fender. You know what I mean? So your budget for next year.
But it's not really apples to oranges, because
it's
we're
not-
passing this
The
along.
important thing to remember here, though, is don't confuse revenue and budget, okay? So you have to start with the budget. The budget only goes up 5%. The budget is the $50 million, okay? Then how we collect money to fund the budget is the rest of the equation, okay? And even though it happens to be our money,
Yeah.
the $1 million is part of the collection of the money. What you're saying becomes an issue, so to speak, to the towns the year that we can't spend $1 million. Then that goes to them. It doesn't make it 5 versus 7, but it artificially increases their assessment. That's why their assessments are up more than the budget is up, okay?
This year.
This year. Because remember that 80-20 I talked about at the beginning, about 80% comes from the towns, and about 20% comes from our own sources, be it E&D, be it Chapter 70, be it regional transportation. If you look at our own sources, they are virtually even to down slightly. It has to do with the school choice and things like that. So that means the other 80% of the budget, other 80% of the revenue source, that 80% is funding the entire increase. So therefore, the entire increase is on the 80%. Therefore, that's why it's a larger percentage number than the overall increase, because it's an increase of their revenue, and so they're picking up the whole 5% on their 80% of the budget.
Okay.
But wouldn't that only be true if you didn't refund the money back into E&D?
What, is that question?
So
Yeah.
what she's saying is, it's not like it's a reserve, because you're actually spending it. And so what you're saying would be
Some of it.
true if you weren't putting the money back at the end of the year into
Right, but
E&D.
there's no guarantee, we're not putting the money back. We don't have an appropriation to put the money back. There's no guarantee it will go back. Conceivably, it could end up being less. I mean, it's not going to be, hopefully, but conceivably, I mean, there is such thing as an E&D deficit. You know, you could have a deficit. Some towns have a certified free cash deficit. That can happen. It shouldn't happen, but it can happen, all right? It's less likely to happen in the school district because we're not a direct taxing authority. It wouldn't happen by the same amount, but it can happen. So E&D is not appropriated. We don't appropriate to E&D. It's naturally occurred.
But it's built in somehow.
No, it's
because-
not.
No, it's not built
It's
in.
not
So
built
we're
in.
not saying we're gonna have, we're gonna say this is for E&D. We're saying that if the the facilities budget comes in lower, we can put some in. But if the finance budget, the copier budget comes in higher, we have to take some out. So it's the move in what's happening in reality. No budget is perfect, because you don't know exactly what the copier expense is going to be. You don't know exactly what the snow removal expense is going to be.
You don't
the
know
question
exactly
is-
what the heating costs are gonna be.
No, and I get that, but the question right now is, are we talking about 5% or are we talking about 7%
It's
increase?
talking about 5%. But back to the E&D, just to make sure I'm right. We're gonna have 1.2 million after we spend the million, okay? That we know right now. okay?
Until we replenish.
At the end of the, right, so we know, until we replenish. So where does the replenishment come from, okay? It comes from balances in our budget, money we don't spend, okay? It comes from there. And what Kathy said is absolutely true. We don't know what that's gonna be. Some years it's more, some years it's less. It's dependent on tons of things, from who we hire, special ed costs, all those things. You know, snow costs, a good example. So say, this is just, say we have 300,000 extra dollars in the year. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's not really that much on a $50 million budget. It's less than 1%, okay? So if we had $300,000 surplus in the year, we would take the 1.2 million, add our surplus, that would give us 1.5 million, okay? Then we look at our revenue. As you see in this budget, we project how much revenue you think we're gonna get, okay? Say we have got 100,000 more than we expected because regional transportation came in higher, like it almost did this year, okay? That would be a revenue surplus. That would go to E&D. So we
That's
go.
money we're getting
We
in,
get it,
not we're spending.
more than we budget. It
We're
has to be more than we budget,
Right.
okay? Because we already used the budgeted money. Our revenues and our budget money are even right now. When we adopt the budget, they're even. So any money we save from spending or extra we get above that, that goes to the E&D. But conceivably, if we misestimate wrong, we might have a revenue deficit, okay? So if we spend every penny in the budget, and we had a revenue deficit of $2 million, even though we didn't spend our E&D, that 1.2 million, we'd certify less. It would be only $1 million next year. So E&D is naturally occurring based on what happens this year. Again, that's a little simplistic, but it's pretty much the way it is. So there's no guarantee at all that it goes back to 2 million any year. We don't create it. It's only created to the way we manage the budget and receive revenues. Many of those things are completely out of our control.
And usually they're not the same year to year.
Right, especially and that's why the way we do things, spending from already on hand is more stable, because we're not projecting what will happen. If we project how much money we're going to get, it makes it less stable. It makes our revenue surplus and deficit likely to be more variable than it is now.
That's responsible.
Well, that's an opinion.
It's an opinion what's an opinion?
What did you say?
I said that's responsible.
Right, and that's an opinion. And I think that's one of the things that we talked
Wait a
about.
second,
was
when
the
you do
difference.
accounting and budgeting, if you budget and you plan based on money you already have, that's responsible. So if I plan based on stuff I did last year, and I know that money's on hand versus my projected income for next year, I know I have money, right?
Good, there you go. All right, so I have more questions for you, George.
Yep.
Are you good?
I'm perfect.
Okay. Another question for you is in the revolving accounts, and we talked about that. And my understanding, my takeaway from that was that we have a full year in the account in reserve.
Not in reserve, earned. In other words, theoretically, and it may not be to the dollar, theoretically, the money we take in from extended day this year, for example, one of our accounts, is being spent next year.
But we still have last year's money in there
No,
this
it's
year.
being spent this year.
So at what point, let's assume that everything is equal and we have the same number of kids and it's the same amount of money per student. So we have 100 kids. It's
Yep.
$3,000 a kid. So at the beginning of this year, we have what in that account?
Depends. I think one of our accounts is a little bit over that, one of our accounts, kindergarten, is a little bit under that, and the rest are pretty much at $300,000 based on your example.
All right, so use 300,000.
Yeah.
And then we have money, you take money out of it, and then in July it gets replenished, is that right?
No, over the course of the year, it gets replenished. So then we're starting July 1st, we got the money, it becomes a revenue, and during that whole year, we collect the tuition, and then by the end of the year, it gets replenished.
So it never goes below what? Theoretically, using that example.
Well, theoretically, I can't really answer that question, because I had to think about it a little bit. Because we don't always spend it right away. I mean, if we spent the $300,000 on the first payroll of the year, I mean, there's other complicated financial issues involved here, and the reason it's important to have reserves. We don't get paid our assessments till August 1st, okay? By virtue of the fact we have small reserves, we have a cash flow so that we can pay our bills. We have to pay payrolls in July still, we have to pay expenses in July. If we had no reserves whatsoever, we'd be in a situation where we have to use, anticipation bonds and do short-term borrowing.
I don't think that would be responsible, and nobody would.
No, I know. So what I'm saying is, but theoretically, if we have $300,000 in one of our revenues, say for extended day, okay? We may use that money in July, because we don't have the rest of the money until August. So if we use that money in July, this is simplistic, okay? We'd have zero in that account, and it would build up over the year back to $300,000.
But we never have zero in the account.
If we used it in July, we would.
If you use some of it.
All of it.
We talked about this.
But we don't use our money equally, because like I say, the lion's share of our money is the assessments, right? We start the fiscal year in July, we pay payrolls, we pay expenses, we pay all that stuff in July. We don't get a penny from the towns until August. So we have to get the money from somewhere in July. So we don't spend our $300,000 for a particular account necessarily at $25 a month, $25,000 a month. You know what I mean? We might have to spend it in July. Usually we have enough cash on hand that this is a theoretical item, okay? But as we continue to spend reserves, we have less cash on hand. Our cash on hand is getting low, will get lower and lower. So there may be times where our cash on hand is going to dip very low.
So we have the E&D account, which is our free cash for emergencies or other projects.
Yeah, whatever it's appropriate.
Whatever we want to do with it.
Yeah, right.
And then we have reserves in the accounts.
Balances in the accounts.
Balances in the accounts.
Yeah.
For offsetting,
Exactly.
ensuring.
For offsetting the costs in the budget, yeah, exactly. Exactly right, yeah.
Okay. I'm uncomfortable. The only thing I'm uncomfortable with in the document is proposing to explain the town's fiscal situations. That makes me uncomfortable. So I appreciate the fact that your background is town administrator, and or fiscal administration, or whatever it was. I apologize. But I appreciate you doing that, but it makes me uncomfortable to see us assessing our towns without giving them the opportunity. And I have not talked to anyone about this comment at all, without giving them the opportunity to present it themselves, especially in a year when we want to go to them and ask for as much as we're asking for. But I think the reason you did this was to give an example of how it works and what some of the accounts were. I still think it would be only fair to allow the towns to explain and provide some definition about that. So I still think that we're very conservative, and I'm good with that. And given where the district was before you came, I can see how we would want to be conservative, but I think it's the degree that I'm not comfortable with.
That's fair.
So I would rather, and this document, as good as it is, it speaks to revenue, but it doesn't really speak to expense, does it?
No, it was designed to talk about the affordability of the budget and,
How it gets paid for.
So, and maybe at this point, this is what you were saying, Nancy, is we're going to talk about, so I think I'm done.
Okay. anyone else have any questions for George about this document, his presentation?
I was curious about this graph, the school choice.
Yep.
So I understand that we had to supplement up until 2009.
Yep.
And as I was following the numbers, I guess what I was losing was, it's a couple of times, I mean, we're taking in, if I'm reading it right, we're taking in over $1 million and we're putting out 316,
Yeah.
right? So this, we brought in over $1 million. What happened to the difference?
It was spent in the budget.
Put in the budget and spent the
So
next
it-
year.
So it doesn't go towards school choice? It's not like it's earmarked for school choice only?
No, it's a revenue source
It's a revenue source of the
that we
budget.
get to spend.
It's a, right, it's a, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
This was the whole reason we went to
Why we did it.
more, was to generate more revenue.
That's fine. So when we got these revenue sources and we spent them,
Yeah.
does that get included in our increase of budget?
Again, you need to
It's
revenue, not budget.
You need to differentiate revenue and expenditure, okay? The budget increase is the budget increase. That's, when it's 5%, it means we're authorized to spend 5% more than the previous year. We're never.
We can't spend more than that.
Right, we cannot spend more than that, absolutely correct. We cannot spend more than we're authorized to spend, okay? Therefore, whatever the expenditure increase is, it is. Where the revenue comes from, be it school choice or whatever, for the most part, doesn't matter. I mean,
So we can spend it, but it doesn't get included?
it does. It does. If you look at your budget, if you look at the executive summary, and you go to the bottom of the executive summary, the total budget, the amount of money we spend is going up 5.05%. Okay? That's everything that's spent. Then you see offsets, okay? That's money that we have on hand that we use to reduce the budget that goes to assessment. That's where the school choice money is. Okay? So if you go down below, you see that the net budget is 5.76%. That's not the real number, but that's the effective cost, okay? Our spending is only going up 5%, 5.05%. From line to line, it's only up 5.05%. Some years that secondary number is more, some years that secondary number is less. It depends on what we have to offset it with, okay?
So it's kind of like a part-time job. So like you have your main job and you get most of your income from that. This is like a part-time job.
In a way, that's a good way to put it. Right. So so the point is, this year we have 141,000 left because we've taken $200,000 hit in school choice. That's the 80-20 thing I was talking about earlier. That's why the assessments from the towns is going up more than the budget's going up, because they are picking up, the 80% is picking up the whole budget increase plus $141,000.
So it's not really 80%, it's more like 82, 83, 85.
Of the revenue, not of the,
Right,
not of the expense, right, of the revenue. That's where the revenue went up.
So you work less part-time in your job, but you still have the same expenses, so you better work more on your full-time job,
Right.
get some overtime dollars. So it goes back to the town.
Right, that's exactly. No, it reflects what the source of the money spent is. The money spent is still only 5.05%. That's all the budget's going up.
That's a lot.
I understand.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I know.
But it's not going up 5.76%. That's probably a bad term that we use in that total budget, because most of the time, it was probably going the other way, and no one cared. But when it goes this way, and it's going to keep going this way, so our school choice is going down. So the amount, the towns are going to absorb more of the increases in the future through their assessments at this rate.
In the future?
Yes, because of the school choice policy change, we're going to have less school choice money. We're going to go from 1.3 to probably 600,000 over a 4-year period. So that's a shift of revenue. But that's fine. I mean, fine. But when we talked about the program, that's everybody agreed to that. So.
This budget assumes, wait.
Oh, go ahead, if you have a question
It's
about
not a
this.
document.
Okay. Does anybody out here have a question for George on this document as he presented it?
I do.
Okay, Stan?
Comment, a couple of questions. Of all the things that George said and discussed about the E&D budget, fully applies to free cash, which is it's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to be replenished year to year. So for every argument that George made about E&D, it's the same argument with free cash. Just to give a little historical perspective, in Bolton, our free cash after it was certified years ago was upwards of $1.8 million. It's now half of that. And a lot of that is due to the tightening of our budget over the last decade, where one component of replenishment is what the departments turn back. And we're squeezing the departments every year. As a matter of fact, yesterday, before the budget discussion, the school budget discussion, the advisory committee was going through, I forget which department's budget, and there was a line item for $100, and they took $90 out of it and left 10 there. So that's the level of scrubbing we do with our budget each year. So right now we have about $983,000. We typically, from year to year, need to spend about 75% of that. And we've set a target of, we want to have a minimum of $250,000 when we're done. You know, despite the fact that we can have an infinite amount of money in that free cash budget, the replenishment comes from sources that are all unpredictable. Turnbacks, maybe a few people bought new cars that we didn't think about, we bought a couple new homes. One year we got some revenue back because of some assessment of telecommunications equipment. So it's all unpredictable. So right now, this year, we were planning before the budget to use 3/4 of that for a variety of capital projects and whatnot. And George is correct, we weren't planning on going up to the levy limit. With the budget that's being proposed, we now have to go to the levy limit. We have to use about $515,000 of this $983 just to balance the budget. And if we wanted to do some of the things we want to do, we're going to have to borrow, which is a situation that we don't necessarily want to do. And as far as the stabilization fund is only used for unexpected and emergency purposes. And once you take money out of the stabilization fund, there's no way to put money back unless you have some source to put it back in. And to take money out or put money in, it requires a 2/3 vote at the town meeting. So the stabilization fund is entirely off limits. That is used for unexpected emergency expenses that are unanticipated. It is not, would never ever be used for a reoccurring budget need in town. So that's just that stuff there. So just wanted to clear that out.
I wasn't suggesting necessarily that you spend it. I was just comparing our reserves versus town reserves. I don't disagree with what you say.
Yeah, but you really don't have an equivalent stabilization.
No, that's the point. That's the point. We don't have that. That's why we have to rely on our E&D. We can't have a stabilization fund.
Well, we had something like it, right? We had that
We
fund
had a
that the
special reserve
government
fund, which we
gave
just
us
did.
back,
Yeah, we
right?
got rid of it.
But we got rid of it.
We can have a stabilization fund if the towns agree, but we don't have one.
I have a quick question on school choice since you were talking about it. I've never quite understood, and I don't think a lot of people do. It's kind of a two-part question if I could. How many school choice kids do we have in Neshoba, regional?
100. 100.
100 at the high school?
Just high school.
That's what I'm asking. And then here's the real question. What does it cost, they pay how much per student to come here?
$5,000.
They pay $5,000.
Plus some special education costs in certain instances on certain formulas.
What does it cost to educate a kid in this district?
I don't think the chairman probably wants
It's a
to go
loaded
through.
question.
Yeah.
Depends on how you want to calculate it.
Our per pupil is around $12,000, but the point of losing $7,000 per pupil is something I could argue with you this evening, but I don't really think it's this time to it. Our overall philosophy is, and again, I understand the debate, I don't want to get into it, is that we've added these students on the margin, and therefore the real cost is zero, or very close to zero.
Oh boy, we don't want to do this.
Right, I agree.
Well, I think, I'm glad you're trending the right way to have less of them, because I think this is a losing deal, it sounds like.
And that's fine, I think that's the majority opinion, and that's why we're doing it, that's what I said. I'm not trying to argue the policy, I'm just trying to explain the logic.
Because that 12,000 number doesn't actually include facility costs and construction of schools or anything like that, to do building a school, correct?
Yes, it does.
It does?
Yeah, it's fully loaded.
Okay. Well, I feel a little better about that. Thank you.
Any other questions for George? All right, great. Thanks. That was helpful.
Good, hope so.
Are we going to get to the broader, here we are.
That's right now. Now, we're going to have discussion of the FY16 budget. And we have all of our administrators patiently waiting for any questions that might arise here. What I would like to do, if this is agreeable to the group, is to start with a discussion, maybe a timed discussion. And then I'd like to go around the room one at a time and talk about what I just want to make sure that we're hearing from everybody what their opinion is about the budget. And we need to come to a determination if there's something that we want to see as an option or something different or something changed, that we need to make a request of George and Michael that they can do that for us so we can see that. Or if we want to say this is too low or this is too high, that we have an opportunity to say that. I'm going to go first. But first, is there any discussion, just open discussion?
I had a couple questions.
Go for it.
One of the things that was presented at the budget workshop was the hope to have one-to-one Chromebooks for 8th grade. And there was the number 78,000, and I was confused if that was the cost this coming year to fund it, or if that was what the total cost was over 3 years. So we were talking about basically like 25,000 per year to lease.
Talking about 25 to 30, it's in the budget for 30,000, it may come in under that. The actual cost in this budget is 30,000.
Okay, and where does that show up in the budget?
In the
Just
district
under
technology budget.
District technology, okay. Because there wasn't a specific line item, so I just wasn't, I mean,
I think there is a line item.
It's lease.
It says lease, 30,000.
To continue on that, when Suchi came in to talk to us,
He's here.
When we talked, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understood what he was talking about, is he going to be speaking later?
No.
Okay. When you had, 2 years ago, when you had the people come in and do the network, all right, what they did not take into consideration was any one-to-one installations. So basically, he's kind of piecing together one-to-one where he can. And that's the wrong way to do it. I mean, if you're going to do if eventually you're going to end up at one-to-one, you should have a plan to get to one-to-one and then start working towards it. And we seem to be going backwards. I mean, you really should have a plan before you start adding things to it. A physical plan.
Is this relevant to the whole budget?
Absolutely, because now you're going to be putting in the high school, you're going to be putting one-to-one, and then not going to be able to log on. It's going to be too slow.
Yeah, you can. Chi, you want to describe the plan for going forward?
For one-to-one.
I didn't hear you clearly, sorry. So you said like,
Well,
your
my
question is like, our current setup is not adequate? Is that your question?
No, but there isn't a network plan, a physical plan to go one-to-one. So basically, as you're putting in one-to-one at the junior highs, you're going to have to patch in or try to get it to work. And you already talked about the fact that, you put one room in at one-to-one, the class next door can't do it because it just doesn't have the bandwidth.
That is only because that, for example, that device cannot handle that much. It doesn't mean like our instructor cannot handle. Actually, our instructor is very good. They can handle that.
The instructor?
It's an instructor.
Infrastructure.
Think that way. You want to move like 100 students from one town to another.
Yep.
Okay, like we have the highway like 495. You can do that, but you won't have one car. You cannot squeeze 100 students in one car. But the highway is there. So now we put like three cars there. You can easily do that. So So that is what we are doing now. We put more AP, meaning like more bus on the highway, which we have. So our setup is good. It just we need to add more this kind of bus. Yes.
So,
Yeah. Does that make sense?
absolutely, makes perfect sense.
Well, no, basically, I mean, all of these have distance limitations, and they have, you know, depending on the protocol, I mean, there are things that you have to do. And from what my understanding is, you do not have the network to go one-to-one eventually. So as you start putting things in, you might not putting it in correctly. So now, you may have the right pieces of equipment, but they're not configured correctly, because there's no plan. You're just putting them in as you need them.
No, we actually do. Like that day, like what I explained over there, I'm not quite sure what part you think is not adequate. I think from...
There's no plan
No, we have a plan.
to go one-to-one.
Yes.
And we have the infrastructure. Part of the plan this year is to make it more robust. And this piece, the access point, is a very small, minute. And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it's the fix, yes, if there isn't a difference between getting onto the computer within 5 seconds versus waiting for 10 seconds. So this is the end of the run, so to speak, and this is the quick fix to speed up access. And that's part of the plan as well, to be able to respond as we go through the buildings, as we go through who's using the computers, to be able to respond and address it physically in the buildings.
Okay. What I would like to do is, I would like to see a plan, because that's what I do for a living. I'd like to see a plan, all right, and then I'd like to vote on it, because from my understanding right now, what I've seen is it's a 2-year-old plan, and it was for the existing setup. It is not for the future. That's my understanding of it right now.
I don't know where you're getting that understanding. He's the expert, and he's telling you we have a plan.
I'll take a look at it. If you don't mind, I would like to take a look at it, because right now, I mean, to actually add devices to a system that can't take it, you're just causing a problem.
No, actually, let me explain another way. I think you are thinking, well, just like try to band-aid things. Actually, it's not. My philosophy of doing this is we monitor the usage, then we kind of put in more when we need. I don't think it's a good.
You know, you might have the right thing. It might be perfect. But from everything I've heard so far,
Yep.
I'd rather see it. So if you can show it to me and I can take a look at it, I'd be more comfortable voting on adding devices. Because what I don't want to have happen is I don't want a problem to be created by adding devices thinking that we're helping people. And we're just going to be slowing them down and costing us money.
It's an operational thing. I don't think it's appropriate for the school committee to be voting on what our staff to do as part of their daily work.
No, they can do that. All I'm asking you to do is to look at the plan. And then I would be more comfortable.
We've shown her the plan,
No,
but each
I
time
have
it's not enough, so.
No, you have not shown me the plan. You
Okay,
showed me the pieces.
we've shown you our plan. We haven't shown you what you want to see.
Can we agree, Lynn, that you can investigate this and not take this time on a budget discussion?
That's what I asked for. I asked to see the plan. That's all I asked for, and then I would be more comfortable.
Okay. If we could make that happen, that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Any other discussion items or questions about the budget overall?
You wanted to go around the table?
I do want to go around the table, yes, but I want to make sure that there are, that we've addressed any other questions.
The unknowns, like.
Yeah, or questions, if there's something that you don't understand, or there's something that needs to be clarified before you want to form an opinion. I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask.
Oh, you want an opinion from us? Oh, I'm not giving an opinion. Not yet.
You're not giving an opinion, okay.
No, but I do have questions then. I thought you wanted to.
Okay.
So one of the things we talked about last week was the facilities budget, and that one particular item was going to be reduced. But we also talked about how the facilities budget is derived. And have you thought any more about alternative options? Well, within the facilities budget, I know we talked about the bucket of money being based on last year's total budgeted amount, including one-time expenses. So, when we met, you said that this increase is based on that amount of money, which includes one-time expenses from last year. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so explain it to me again. Because I thought what you said was, you like to have an amount of money so that you can do what you need to with it, without having to define specific line items. Did I get that wrong?
I don't know if you got it wrong. I don't think that's what I said.
Well, that's good news, bad news.
Yeah, right. I think you were talking about the scheduled maintenance projects, part of the facilities budget. And that's what we do. So almost by definition, everything in that budget line is a one-time expense. So we have a similar amount of one-time expenses this year as we did last year. Because, and there may be some things that are multi-year one-time expenses, but they're maintenance projects, they're things we're adding or changing. The things that we do, you know, like every year would be, we have a repair budget, a general repairs budget. That would be the type of things that, you know, we do each year, and there wouldn't be one-time expenses as much there. But the budget that you're talking about is by definition virtually all one-time expenses. And this year happens to be about the similar amount as last year's.
And we actually do that on purpose, so we don't have spikes in our plan. So we move items around depending on the prioritization, so that the scheduled maintenance is even.
Is school choice is figured into this budget, including school choice at the high school? We had this discussion a couple of times, and I want to make sure that I got it right. But so this assumes that going forward, we will have school choice at the high school.
No, it will just have a larger impact in future years' school choice revenues if we did not. Because we're spending, like I said, we have, as the chart showed you, have about almost $900,000 in income. We're spending a couple $100,000 plus on the reserve account. The reserve account will still have $600,000 left in this year. No matter what we did going forward, we would have some money for next year, but that would go down quicker if we didn't have school choice. So this budget uses school choice, but if a future decision not to have school choice was there, it would be, this would not impact this budget.
Didn't Michael say, though, that the number of students, since the high school is fed from the middle schools, that the number of, really, the number of students, if we start to phase it out at the high school now, is not going to be a big hit, because it's being fed by, it's just backfilling for kids that move out. So it's not going to be 20 kids a year. I mean, that's exorbitant, right?
Well,
So why would we not want to consider eliminating school choice at the high school now?
You could do whatever you'd like, as we discussed earlier about the other school choice, but there's going to be a revenue impact, and that revenue impact is a shift to the assessment. However you want to do it, it's fine. That's the revenue impact.
But it's relatively small considering
It'll
that
be-
it's already been killed in K through 8.
Well,
I just want to,
By
and
next
this is
year.
something I did not know until we went through the ending of the program for K through 8. One of the things that changes is not only the numbers we have in the pipeline, but it's the sibling connection. And so there might be a more rapid exodus if, out of current kids at our high school, if the plan all along was to bring in a sibling, whether they got in K through 8 or not, but the plan was to bring in at 9th grade, if they're not able to do that, then that sophomore may go as well. So I just want to that's been our experience, and so people need to be aware that the change in revenue might be greater than we might expect. based
by
on
definition, if you were not having more school choice in high school, we'd be down about under 50 students in 5 years.
Oh, easily.
Easily, probably
Yeah,
less.
probably less.
So I mean, it would be over the 6 or 7 year period, $1 million at least plus reduction in revenue. Because we use 1.3 million up until this year, and by 4 years from now, we'd be down to 200,000 probably.
It feels uncomfortable to use school choice as a revenue. It just doesn't feel right to me. And similar to what this gentleman said, and we had this discussion like 5 years ago, and I remember saying, how can it all be on the margin? I still don't know how all that's on the margin, but I'll let you, I'll accept it for now. But I think that given the constraints that we have, given the fact that we have a really healthy budget, I'm sure there are ways for us to unravel the commitment that we have with the money that comes in from school choice. There has to be ways.
Right, but you can't.
Because wait a second, I'm sorry. We didn't have school choice to this extent forever. It's only been in the past 5 or 6 years that it's, and so in 5 or 6 years, oh my God, all of a sudden we've become used to it, and now it's part of our fabric, and we need to unwind it. So I still would like to not include school choice at the high school in this budget.
Wait, but we're just talking about 2016 budget, and it's already a done deal.
It is, but I want to make sure that we discuss this and it doesn't just kind of float away once this is done.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about having that discussion later in
Right.
March, and as we do every year, and usually it starts in the policy subcommittee and then comes to the full committee. But again, I think that that's not, as you mentioned, it's not like we're gonna flip a switch and say school choice is over. We still have all these kids in the pipeline.
Right, which is great, actually.
So, I know, but, so the impact will not, on the next year's budget is not great, no matter what.
Right.
It's not at all.
Yeah, so I don't know how this discussion right now is relevant to our budget.
I'm bringing it up because I just want to make sure that we don't forget it.
Okay.
Because we happen to.
And I promise you we won't, and I know that you won't let us forget it. We'll do it. We'll do it. I mean, I just don't think that we should be doing it tonight.
That's fine. I have a couple other things.
Okay.
OPEB. I know it's uncomfortable, but did we establish the trust? I thought we did. Okay, so that's good. I thought we had. And there isn't anything in the budget right now to commit to OPEB, and I know how you feel about it. But I think that we need to be really responsible. And Kathy, to your point earlier, OPEB is something we should be looking at if we're looking at being responsible. And I just learned last night that Bolton has, less than, what's your annual budget? What?
For which?
For the town?
It'll be about 22 million.
And they're looking at earmarking 186,000, I think, and we've been complaining about $150,000 on a $50 million budget. And our liability for retiree health is much greater than the town's. And you have so many more employees and so many more retirees. So I think we really need to be responsible and think about funding OPEB on a regular basis every year. It should become an insurance payment, just like an insurance payment. So we haven't really, that's not in the budget, and I think it should be in the budget. The other thing is, I'm surprised that you haven't come back and said, here's a couple of different options, and we talked about that last week. So I don't know if you have them or if you're getting ready to establish them, but I'm not comfortable with just being given one set of numbers and assuming that that's where it's going to be, because.
So that's what this is.
I
This is
would-
a discussion.
well, that's great.
Yeah, to ask for what else you'd like to see. And I think in the last meeting that we had, it was pretty much a presentation of the budget. The idea was that we would go away and say, do our thinking, ask our questions, come back again, do more thinking together, ask our questions together, and then say, well, this is what we'd like you to come up with next, or either that, or we want you to raise it, or we want you to lower it, or we want you to give us 2 more options that include this, this, and this.
Oh, good.
So that's what we're doing now.
Oh, all right, well, I didn't know that that's what the.
Yeah,
Did you
so-
guys understand that? I guess I must be doing that, not understand that. So if you are looking for a suggestion.
Yeah, so if you have a suggestion, go for it.
I think I brought this up last week. I'm really not comfortable with 5% because I don't know enough about what's in the detail of the budget, but I can't imagine that there isn't somewhere that we can make some tightening of the belt that doesn't impact the classrooms and doesn't impact the teachers. And
So can you turn that into an idea?
like where to cut?
Or a number.
Or something. We need something to go on. If it's going to be like, okay, I can't stomach 5%, but I could stomach 4%. Well, then that's something
No, I
different.
couldn't stomach 4% either.
Okay, if you
I
can't
could
stomach-
feel better about maybe between 2 and 3%.
Okay, so if that's what you want to see, then say
I'd like to
that.
see the scenario.
Okay.
So maybe a piece of information so folks know. So roughly, we're talking about 504, 500.
Just 500.
500,000 for each percent that would have to come, so at 5%, we're talking about, to get to 3%, you're talking about $1 million, just so you know what the context is.
So as a discussion point, so that's an idea. You want to throw that out and we'll agree to say, yeah, that's what we want you to do. We want you to come back to us with a, what would it look like if we had a budget that had a 2.5% raise instead of a 5% raise? Would that be good? I mean, I'm trying to,
Sure, if everybody else agrees to it, but I'd like to see at least a couple percentage points off that.
okay.
Or 40.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's my place or not, I don't need to come here regular, but what is the historic norm in the last 5 years for increases? It seems like 5 is really high, I mean, I agree with her. It seems like 5 is more than norm, is that correct or not? Michael?
For the last few years, it's higher, but
Okay.
that's because of that.
I mean, I haven't read the budget, but
Right.
what's the big change this year? Because that is a big change, $1 million.
Well, we've kept the budget low to meet a lot of different needs, and those needs have now crept into our school system to be able to have to address them.
Can I answer that one? Sure. Because I went at it from that angle. I said, so, okay, we have a 5% increase, and what we want is level services, right? We don't want to take away programs. We don't want to fire teachers. We don't want to cut out programs. We don't want to take away things that we already have. So if there's a 5% increase in the budget, why? And what are we getting from that 5%? So this is the way I chose to approach it, and I don't know if anybody, I'm going to just carry on here, but, so out of that 5%, what percentage went to what? That's what I wanted to know. So I did it. I did the numbers. So basically, and I start every budget discussion with this to remind everybody that 80% of our total district budget is in human resources. That's what we do. We educate people, and people are educators. So 80% of our budget is salaries. So we'll start there. So out of the 5% increase, what's going on? Why do we have it? We have 60% of that 5% going to our increases in salaries that are based on the contract that was negotiated last year. So we have no control over 60% of that 5%. We can't touch it.
Unless we cut teachers, right?
Unless we
Cut teachers.
yes.
That's the only way to control that.
Exactly.
I don't like saying you can't control it, because you can control it, but the control is to cut teachers.
Well, you don't have to cut teachers, you could cut non-teaching staff.
I'm sorry, you cut people.
People who
You
have
to cut
salaries.
People who have
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be a
salaries.
teacher. It could be a guidance counselor. It could be a nurse.
Aide.
It could be,
Yeah.
right.
It could be a coordinator, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm just using rough numbers. Okay, so 60% is in that. And we don't have control over that unless we fire people. Okay, then 30% of that 5% goes to special ed out-of-district placements. We have no control over that. That's based on who lives in our district that we can't provide services for, so we have to send them somewhere where they can be taken care of. And it's our responsibility, and we don't have any control over that. So we've got 60% in salary, we've got 30% in special ed out of placement. And then, what George was talking about, the increase in benefits, the insurance, and the other stuff that we don't have any control over, that's 10% of the 5%. So we've got 30 in out of placement, out-of-district placements, 10% in benefits, 60% in salaries. That actually equals 100%, which is not accurate, but that's because of the rounding off that I did. There's actually another little number in there, which is, I think 1.8%, I'm gonna round it to 2%, which brings this whole thing up to 102%, so you have to, be aware of that. So 2% roughly out of that 5% is for new hires. So that's what this budget is proposing. And that's to me, that those are the numbers that we need to be thinking about and understanding and saying, is this what we want?
And can I add one thing to what you said, and it goes right back to what Lorraine was talking about, and Lynn at the beginning, is 5% looks like a big number, so when at first it's like, oh my, but then when you think about, did we really do the same thing in the last few years, but offset it more, so it didn't seem so big? I feel like it didn't, the offsets were more, so it didn't impact us so much. Like we had higher school choice.
But again, we can't
do that.
We can't mix revenues and expenditures.
But it makes the numbers, like, it seems big this year because everything changes every year. You know what I mean? So if you have less stuff coming in and, I just feel like there's not a lot we can do other than if we want to cut.
I think you're right, because but what you're talking about is the additional, the increase. We haven't even, I want to know where in the 50 million do you have opportunity to tighten the belt, and I haven't heard that. And you could say I'm wrong.
There theoretically isn't any place unless you
But George is better than that. George is much better than that.
Unless you want to cut.
But the way Nancy just
Well,
explained
it may
it,
not be people. It could be, somebody forwarded this to me, it could be that 16 out of 43 of the executives in the district receive a travel allowance to the tune of $35,000 a year. Outside of Michael's, in his contract, that's ridiculous. So there could be places.
Lorraine, that's not fair.
That's not fair.
How could it not be fair?
Because there's a 50-cent per mile IRS reimbursement requirement, and we actually save money.
Right, that's economical to do it that way.
It is. So why not just move it into their salary?
You still have to pay for their mileage, then that's a double dip.
But I didn't know this. I didn't know anything about this. This is uncomfortable to me.
It's the structure of
But
this.
these are people in our.
But if you're looking at where are there opportunities for us to look for savings, I'm not saying this is it, but I'm saying, wow, that was surprising. I'm sure there's other things, so I'd rather you tell me.
Well, I'm not sure why it was surprising, because there is a line item for it, but it's, again.
How much driving do they do?
That's
A lot.
35,000 over all those people.
Over 16 people.
That equates to about
In 3
$70,000
towns.
a year.
Where the hell are you driving?
At current IRS rates, which actually went up in 2015 to 57.5 cents, that 35,000 represents close to 70,000 miles.
We need to increase our rates. For 2015, all those are static.
Anyway.
So the
My point on this is, we're talking, the 5% that
They
Kathy,
increased the IRS.
the comment that you just made, and just piggybacking off of that. No, it doesn't look like, there's a little bit in there, we know a couple of places where it needs to be adjusted. But what about the 50 million? Is there something in there that we can do?
So the places that, to Nancy's point, the places that we can make adjustments are places, well, first of all, since 80% is personnel, we would have to look at personnel, because that's where you're gonna get the biggest dollars quickest. So that's one bucket. The other bucket are places that respond to circumstances that we historically have an understanding of what we have to respond to, like facilities. But right now, is every dollar attached, other than scheduled maintenance, under the repairs? Is it attached to a repair? No, because we don't know what the repairs will be. But we can cut those lines to $1,000, but when we talk about unexpected expenditures, that's where at the end of the year, we're gonna be a deficit spending, because we didn't plan thoughtfully for that kind of thing. You know, we use historical data to inform ourselves about those kinds of things. I think that, you know, again, people don't want to talk about it, the 80% is personnel, and so you would have to look at personnel to get, you know, to get to 3%, $1 million. It's not going to be a line out of facilities.
So when we sign the warrants every week and every 2 weeks, and when we look at them, the only thing that every time, I even said it again, the only thing that makes me get is the copier lease. Like everything else is so small. Like it's lots of things, but they're small items. And other than the warrants to pay the personnel, it's small items. And you know, I know George has worked hard to get the copier. He's got a system on a copier because it's a big line item on the little bucket. You know what I mean? But it's not even a big line item.
It isn't.
So it's like, I wish there was more, and I look in the warrants to see for those little things if there's something glaring. And it's discouraging to sit here and say this. It's totally discouraging, but I just don't feel like there's a lot there. The buckets, unless we cut services.
But I can just add, Nancy, I want to thank you for your explanation of where things go and where they come from and so forth. But there's a couple of things maybe people forget or don't quite understand also, and I'm not an expert in the budget here, okay? But just because we had something last year doesn't mean we have to have it this year.
Absolutely.
Some things just go into the sunset and go away because they're not needed anymore or they're not useful anymore. And some programs, some classes should be eliminated. And sometimes it's really hard to do that kind of stuff because it's just there. And then you just keep adding on. And you say, this is what like when he's talking about the budget, well, this is what it was last year, and we added on this and this. And it just keeps growing. And there's never anything taken away that was always there because it was always there. And just a couple of other comments. And personnel does change because you do have attrition. And sometimes you don't have to replace a person that retires. I'm saying people that leave or retire for various reasons, as we all know. And finally, I don't know how many of you all got 5% increases in your pay last year, but I'm not sure everybody in this room did. I don't think so.
And nobody in this district is. That 5% is the
But that's the budget increase though, still. I think that's what
But the salary increases.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
Okay.
that's what the cost is to all of us.
And we do look at non-recurring items that can be dropped off, and we do look at every staff. It's a difficult conversation. I know the principals wince when I do it, but I look very carefully at every one of their enrollments, and we reduce staff where the enrollment doesn't meet our guidelines, and it's a little bit, for lack of a better word, non-educational jargon, fluffier than what we might need to have it to be, and we make those cuts, and those decisions get made. We are going to have people not work here next year because of that, and that's already been taken care of. I do that part. The next level to get to a reduction of this budget are the ones that get it tighter. So our average of class size may be at 22. So the next level will be, we're gonna have to push it to 24 or maybe 25 because we gotta get there, because every dollar is tied to a person. Every dollar. Programmatically, we have 74 special ed instructional assistants. We look at every one of them relative to their IEP that they're attached with, and we count minutes to be sure that we are not overstaffed. And I know those principals and our director of special ed look at every one of them, and over the course of the time that I've been here, we've had a reduction of instructional assistants. I think we were somewhere over 100 when I got here. We're down to 74. We were down lower. We've had to creep back up, but that's relative to programming. And it's a fine balancing act, because the other place we incur an expense is when parents, rightfully so, it's the process, can make a decision to have their children go to an out-of-district placement. And if the IEP team agrees, then that decision gets made, and that's a cost to the district. So we either pay for it and program correctly and adequately and appropriately for our kids, and we keep our families educated in their district school, which I strongly philosophically believe that's what we should do, or we cut staff deeper than what I professionally recommend, and we take our chances. I mean, those are the kinds of things. That's not a sad sack. It's not. I mean, but that's the reality. I mean, we have the count. We have the minutes. I'm just trying to show you how, or explain to you how we arrive at the numbers that we decide to keep and how many we decide to keep, let go. And, you know, that's how we arrive at these numbers. And there will be transitions for next year. You know, we will move staff because students are moving. So, you know, it's not like, so if students move and programmatically an instructional assistant has to go with them, we don't then replace another one back here unless the minutes require it. But if they don't get another replacement. And that's a hard issue within the schools, because the schools, there is a level of management of the schools, especially the elementary schools, with duties and so forth that are required. And we're teetering in some of our schools for meeting contract obligations and making sure that our schools are appropriately supervised at every test times. So we're right there, and you know, that's why we're asking for the increase.
Probably want to just add to that too, that programmatically as well, everything is being reviewed. So it's not like if there's a class that's outdated, well, because we taught it last year, we're going to teach it again. I mean, that's why we have the people in the curriculum development making sure that we're teaching the right stuff, and that we have at the high school in particular, where it's less about class size but more about class offerings and leveling, that we have the classes that we need to have. It's not as simple as, well, we taught it last year, so we'll do it again. Okay. Well, I don't want to put people on the spot, but
Well, you put me on the spot, put everybody on the spot.
well, no, you said you didn't want to share your opinions, but you did. That was your choice, and you didn't have to. But now we have an opportunity to. I just want to make sure that we've heard what you wanted to say. Kathy, we'll go around.
I thank you, George, for that information. It was very clearly written. I think that the principals and the administration and the teachers did a great job putting together a budget. I know it's hard. Sitting on this committee now for a year and a half, there's so much people want that's above and beyond what we do. And that's the exciting part for me. Like, oh my gosh, Perry had this idea about doing this. And Nancy level setted me last week saying we have to get something that'll get approved, you know. So I appreciate your years of experience on this, because I want more, but I know we can't pass more, and I don't want to lose what we have, and it's not just what we had last year, but all the work that we saw them rearrange and get what we need. So, you know, I'm just, you know, I think that you guys did a great job putting this together. I feel confident in a lot of the things. I wouldn't mind seeing, you know, a couple versions. If we were to take out a little here or there, what would your opinion be, Michael, or your principal's opinions or staff opinions be? If we had to take a little bit out everywhere, what would that look like? But, you know, I do want more, because I feel like we are a very cost-effective school. We measure in the bottom third. You know, we're $2,000 more per pupil cost than the lowest school in our state, and we're over $10,000 less than the highest school in our state. So even if you say we're bottom third, we're not even near the average, you know. So that speaks something to me, that we're frugal. Would I like to be less frugal so our kids get more? I do, but I want to be fiscally conservative and responsible to our towns as well. So it's hard.
That's all. Okay, thanks. Nicole?
I was lucky enough with Lorraine to sit with the two of you for what was it, a couple hours last week, and this document that you presented today was pretty much exactly what I was looking for. I would like to sit with it for another couple days and see if all of my questions were answered. I agree with Kathy in that our per pupil expenditure is conservative, and we would obviously like to be able to do more. Being such a dramatic increase, however, is hard to absorb all at once. And like Lorraine said, not being able to look, it doesn't seem like we're able to really look at the 99% of the budget, and we're just talking about 1% when it comes to the 5% increase that we're talking about. Does that make sense? We're only kind of talking about that 5% increase.
Yeah, but the whole budget is right here in front of us.
Yes.
You can ask a question about any single line item you want. I mean, it's...
And I don't feel like that's my job either. I don't want to get all up in their grill and say, well, copy paper, according to Dunder Mifflin, I don't want to pretend like I know even, but it does seem to me that within the largest block of the budget, which we don't talk about because we've talked about the increase and what the increase represents, that I would like to see if we, took some odd amount out of everything, what that would look like. I'm not saying I necessarily would agree with it or go with it, because I don't want to spend less per pupil, if I'm going to be totally honest. But I might want to put money in different places than where it's going now.
So what does that mean that we...
It means that I actually think the budget ask is not that unreasonable. Okay. And where my concerns mostly lie is with how I don't understand where certain... And this is because I am new to this year, and I'm sure it's unfortunate that you probably have to do this every year. I don't understand necessarily the whys and the hows of every line item.
So is there a particular thing that you want to see to make this a doable decision for you, or?
I would like to sit with the white paper that George wrote for a while, and then...
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Maureen?
I don't know. I don't really have a lot to add. I mean, it's 5% seems like a lot, and I've sat through enough town meetings where whatever we came up with, the selectmen would say, we could deal with half that amount or something like that. And no matter what our increase is, it's always going to be painful, and it's going to be more than anybody wants. But I've sat here for enough years watching us say, okay, now what would a 0.5% reduction, a 1% reduction, a 1.5% reduction look like? And we've gone with those, and at some point you can't keep not adding anything just because it costs more just to maintain less. So it's 5% is painful, but I don't see where we can trim more than like 0.5% from it.
So as a request from these guys, there isn't something in particular that you'd like to
I mean, the things I can think of are kind of the nickel and dime things, like not doing Chromebooks, but we're talking about, 20,000 next year or something. So, the one for 8th grade.
Me. My hugest disappointment was that a 5% increase got us virtually nothing new. And that's why I went through the exercise. I went through to say, well, what is it? Why are we getting a 5% increase and we're getting virtually nothing new? I mean, we had a 1.8% increase in our human resources. That's not a lot. And so that was the disappointment for me, because some of the things that I had hoped we could have talked about this year for the first time in many years, some new things like all-day kindergarten and expanded foreign language in the middle school, these programs that we've tabled year after year after year because we say, well, it's the bad economy and we can't do it and we can't do it and we can't do it. And I thought, well, maybe finally this year we could do it. And we're at 5%, we're not doing any of it. So that's just a bummer. It's just, it's really disappointing. So I don't want to take away from what we have. So I'm disappointed that it's at 5%, but I don't want to cut from what we have, because I wanted to grow from what we had, and we're going the wrong way. So that's my opinion.
Aside from me wanting to meet with Suchi, what I would like for additional information is you're asking for additional people for SPED and psychologists and that whole area.
Mm-hmm.
I would like more information about how that how that operates, because I'm wondering if maybe we need to restructure that. Because there's been some conversations, and unfortunately, Nicole, you kind of inspired me to look into it a little bit. It's sorry. I mean, she brought up a great point. I mean, SPED is the issue right now. SPED is driving up the numbers, and maybe we're not approaching it right. I'd like to know, what kind of psychologists do we have? What kind of sociologists do we have? What do they specialize in? Have we outgrown their specialty, or maybe we need more? I mean, I'm not really sure, because I don't know how it operates. But if we look into it, I mean, this might be a way, maybe this needs to be shaken up a little bit. I don't know, because we've never really talked about that area of it, and I think that might be a good place to start, because it is such an unknown, and it's getting larger. And we might be just throwing money after a system that's antiquated. I'd like to see more information there.
Okay.
Because that would help. Because I know that you're saying that you're going to increase in numbers, but I mean, are we helping the right people? Are we, are the people that we have there trained? Do they know what to look for? I have no. That's a new one for me. And one last thing, I went to listen because George spoke in Bolton last night, and I wanted to hear him because he talks more there than he does here. So.
Talk a lot here.
I was going to say tonight. Right. He's just kind of shaking his head. But one of the Bolton selectmen, they were talking about the Chrome. And she had a request. She said, okay, so we give one-to-one Chromes to the 8th grade. She said, for teaching and learning, is there a way to track if these are actually helping? And so there really was no answer, but I love the question, because we've been struggling with, how do we show success? And so if we go out and we do one-to-one, if we're going towards one-to-one, how do we do that? So, I mean, I'd like to hear some kind of a plan that, okay, we're going to do technology, we're going to use technology for teaching and learning. How do we show that it's actually working?
Sure.
Just leaving it.
Okay. We skipped. Lorraine, sorry.
Oh,
we're going around the room.
I think I already talked.
Did you? Okay, I didn't know. I just wanted to make sure that we're going around the room. Everybody got a turn.
No, I thought I got a turn. I didn't pour my heart out on the table, but I think everybody knows where I stand on teachers and students. And
so, is your request standing that you'd like to see a 2.5 5%
No, I said
increased
between
budget?
2 and 3, and I'd like to see a 3 and I don't know if 2 is realistic, but definitely a 3. And I would hope that there would be some, I hope that if you come back with reduction of the 5% to a 3%, that it's not removing, I would challenge you, how's that? I would challenge you to remove, expense in the existing budget, not the ask, unless it's something, as you said last week, which there's some places where we can do that, where we can put a couple things off. So I want to preserve the teachers, I want to preserve the classroom. I think, Nancy, you and I agree on something, because I agree with you on new programs, more innovation. Perry Graham, to your point, is really the most innovative guy we've heard talk in a long time, because he takes these seemingly unrelated subjects and comes up with this new class that's so cool, that kids think is cool, parents think is cool. I'd take the class if I could. But like, that's the kind of stuff that didn't cost you a lot of money. Where'd you go? It didn't cost you a lot of money, did it?
I should point out, I didn't go with those classes, the teachers.
Well, you know what? They work for you. They work for you. But like, that's cool stuff. That doesn't cost a lot of money. That puts us on, in a better stead. I love that. So that's what I would love to see. So kind of combining all that.
But then,
You're welcome. And I would love to get rid of school choice in high school, and I'm done.
Okay.
You sure?
Yeah.
So, have we done our job? Have we given you direction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Be clear.
Okay. I think, unless anyone wants to say anything else, around the table or in the room in general.
I've asked way too many questions already, but I'll ask one more. I'm presuming when you do these budgets, you meet with principals and they meet with their teachers and they say, what can we do different? How can we build this differently? Or, that's all done.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Starts there first.
Can I ask who you are?
I'm Andrew Martin from Stella.
Oh, nice to meet you. I didn't know who it was.
Anything else? Okay, so at our next meeting, we will have the opportunity to review the requests that have been made and have a little more discussion perhaps.
And just to point out that our next meeting is March 11th, and by our regional agreement, we do have to vote that night.
And we'll be voting that night. So that means
I have a question.
we'll have, will we have an opportunity to review
Yes,
the
I'll
things,
have it
the
to you
requests that
next
have been
week.
made prior to the meeting, so that,
Like more than 3 days before.
Yes, the only, I mean,
I can meet with them, it sounds like I'm going to.
yeah, I think you definitely.
So, when you say by regional agreement, do you mean the 3-town school committee, or the 3 towns voted and they, like the selectmen wanted by the 15th?
No, our regional agreement that's voted on by the town voters
So that's
says we
in-
have to have it done by March 15th.
And if we don't?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically the answer, but I
Well,
just
you don't
assumed
get mad at us.
we've got to follow
I'm
it.
just looking over, so it's the 15th, what if we're not ready by the 15th?
Well, the obligation there is to make sure that we give the towns their assessments, because then it works backwards from town meeting, and they need to have their assessment number for warrants.
So is there any wiggle room in that?
Well, I
Have to be
mean,
the 15th?
I'm assuming that the numbers that you got are the worst case numbers, with the exception
Yes.
of whatever happens at the state
Correct.
level.
Correct.
So we have
Oh.
potential with the worst cases, so
Oh, okay, so if we
So-
don't do the 15th, we're not stopping anything?
take your time.
Yeah, we'll research that just to make sure that, I appreciate the gift of time, but I think there may be some other entanglements.
yeah, I'd rather not be the cause of
Legal difficulty. Yeah, but I wouldn't want to make a decision just because it's a
Sure.
deadline.
I respect
Okay, I think then we're done with the budget discussion. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us and for being here. And
that. Thank you, everybody.
we're about to move on to policies, so if that's not your thing, you don't have to stay. Okay, we're up a bunch for second reading. Bring Kara, who else is?
Nicole.
Nicole. Who wants to take this away?
It's pretty straightforward.
Not anticipating.
We
this
had
taking
to
it.
change, in a couple of them, we had to change the reference to sex
Gender identity.
to gender identity, so discrimination and things like that, and just to bring those policies up to, we had to do it on equal education opportunities, we had to do it on one of the employments.
You changed the word sex to gender.
harassment.
Is that what you said?
Gender identity.
Gender
Add a
identity.
protected
Okay.
class of gender identity and
Okay.
change the word sex to gender.
Okay.
So, which is really cool. Then the rest of them, I think, are, you've all read them.
Yes, I think we have. And as far as I could see, there were no new changes, so there really isn't anything we have to talk about, right?
There weren't.
Right.
No.
You take a vote for all of them.
Well, actually,
I just had one-
Can we pull out security?
One question, quibble, possibly it's just grammar, in the one about discipline, or whichever.
Student discipline?
Yeah, which one is that? There's one paragraph that starts with, in order to learn, teachers must blah, blah, blah. And I believe they can, as stated, it's saying teachers are learning. I think.
Oh, you're right,
to
it does.
Either to effectively teach or for students to effectively learn, teachers must blah, blah, blah.
In order for students to effectively learn, that's a good
Yeah.
one, because that gets to what I think the point was, yeah. It's a good
Do you know which policy you're talking about?
Yes.
Is it JIC?
Yeah, and it's right under interventions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Buildings and grounds, is there a question
Yeah,
about that?
I wanna pull that one until I go over the network with Suchi. Just the next one.
Okay.
So we'll exclude that from the vote.
Please.
Anyone have any other? Would anyone like to make a motion? Motion, anyone?
Maureen.
Motion?
No, I only do the executive session.
Oh, fine. What do we have to do? Move that we accept the second readings?
Yes.
With the
I-
exception
with
of
the
the
exception
release.
of-
I move that we accept second readings of the policies as listed with the exception of the buildings and grounds, which will be voted on at a later date.
I second it. Thank you. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Subcommittee reports. Maureen, is there anything with
No, we
finance?
discussed the warrants and discussed a little bit about the E&D and what that means, but that was all covered in the board's presentation. That was about it.
Okay. Personnel. We met, I think that was between this meeting and the last, is that right? Or is that prior to that?
There's been
Yes, it was just after. It was the Friday after our last meeting.
So
This group.
we met to talk about revising or writing the superintendent's goals as we had been charged to do to align them to the district improvement plan. And we actually took that very literally. Our plan is to literally take the district improvement plan and turn that into a superintendent's goals grid that will be nearly identical. And hopefully that's to people's satisfaction. Yes.
Is there any correlation between that and the superintendent report evaluation that we did this last spring? Because the biggest problem I had with that report was, as I was reading it, probably like 70% of it didn't apply.
You mean his evaluation?
Yeah, the evaluation. whatever.
So there are always two pieces to the evaluation process. There's the work toward goals
Yeah.
and the standards by which the policy dictates that I be measured under.
Okay.
So what we are doing is we're putting notifications of where the goals are related to the standards, so that you have information, you know, where there's some cross-section, crosswalk, if you will. And then, you know, as part of my self-reflection to finish that other document where you rate me, I will give you specific accomplishments related under each goal broad area.
But as you're writing it, has that come into effect at all?
As I'm writing.
As you guys are developing this thing, this rubric, you're making a rubric?
It's not a rubric, it's literally a reformatting of the district improvement plan looking at year one.
So have you looked at the evaluation piece at all? Because I'm kind of confused as to how, because I know that when you wrote examples for us, I found it kind of difficult. But, and I know you're probably going to do the same thing, which would help, but it was still not easy.
So maybe we can talk about how to give specific feedback around the because that's a different document. We haven't touched that yet.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the evaluation document. We've just talked about the superintendent's goals.
Yeah, but don't we have to look at, when we're doing the evaluation,
I
don't
see
we have
what
to
you're
look at the
saying.
goals? And
Yes.
say, did he meet the goal? Or is he heading towards a goal? Or is he
Well, and
working towards
that's a
goal?
part of it, just like we put in all these measurable items in the district improvement plan, now there's measurable items in the superintendent's goals.
Right, so I would think that you'd take that document and just kind of see if you actually have something to measure. You know what I mean?
So
Yeah.
yes, so this document is going to show where the standard is in the standards document that you rate,
Okay.
where it connects to my goals. So you will see that.
Okay. But you guys haven't looked at that yet?
We haven't
We have
worked
a
on
draft.
We have a draft of the goals. We don't have a draft of the evaluation tool yet. Yeah.
Well, that's already established. That's already done. We did that last year.
But the goals
Yeah,
are
but
for
we
this
haven't
year.
Right.
We haven't incorporated the goals into it.
Right, so there are two documents. There's the required rating tool, and then there's the goals. So they are two separate documents.
Yep, no, I get that.
And to be continued, we need to reconvene and continue our work on this. It's not ready for you guys yet, obviously.
I think someday we should have just like a nice one page, how all the plans and the rubrics and the evaluation, just like a food pyramid. She kind of had a food pyramid for us that helped her the workshop. Remember she had that?
See if I can get that on that.
We should keep that close by.
Yeah.
Okay, next is policy subcommittee. I have a update from you guys.
Oh. The climate survey. We met with a group of teachers who I'm leading you. And and you're not catching on.
We left with it, all right, so I think what we have to make sure of is that everybody understands what the climate survey is for and what its intent is. So, before I speak, do you guys have any idea what the climate survey is for? I mean, it's really to look across the district at all regular employees, whether they're full-time or part-time, and to understand, and specifically the teaching staff, and to find out how they feel about how their job is, what the morale is, what do we do really well, where are we making strides, et cetera, et cetera. I think there was some misunderstanding with that group of teachers because they believed that the survey was also going to be used as an evaluation tool for the administration. And
the teachers thought that?
Yes. And so I think that's why they wanted to meet with us, and we were like, oh, what's going on? But that is not the intent of the survey. And it wasn't the goal of it, so it wasn't written that way. So it won't really serve its purpose as an evaluation tool. And I think they came away feeling like, okay, I get it, because they're tasked with building an evaluator survey for administration.
For teachers.
For teachers, and I think they thought that we were taking away some of that opportunity.
Weren't we talking about making this anonymous?
No,
The survey?
it's not about, no, they meant, it was a big, so were we. It was like, and I remember even saying, why are we here? I have no idea what's going on. It was a huge disconnect, but maybe I'm going to turn it over to you since I think you started the disconnect.
So the school committee directed the policy committee to look at surveys, and so to do a school climate survey. I think that my thinking about that is that because of the timing that we've decided the school survey, the climate survey was going to go, that would be a part of my evaluation. You know, you would use that as some feedback for me, as a document, as a piece of evidence to suggest future goals and so forth. There is a requirement that there be a survey of staff, of the superintendent, of administrators, and so instead of having multiple surveys out there, it's been my thinking all along, and I did not make it clear to the policy committee, but when we developed the policy, we used the administrative, one of the documents that we looked at, it wasn't one that we used as a primary one, was the mock survey that the state provided for people to kind of build off from. So the confusion, so that's a piece of this confusion. So this group of teachers is from our Educator Evaluation Committee, which has been working very successfully for 2.5 years. Our task has been to design our educator evaluation model. We've done a great job. We're at the same stage. The deadline is June 30th. We need to have a survey available for students to report back and give feedback to the parent, to the staff. I shared, because it was timely, that this is how I was going to do it for the administrators. I was going to use the school climate survey data that we have, the portions that report back about principals specifically. There are a couple of sections that are, I think, good feedback for conversation about future goals, areas of conflict, whatever the climate issues are that they would have some energy or reason to address. So we had one teacher especially who felt as though the committee's role was to do everybody's evaluation tool. And so she had some strong concerns that somehow she was working under a different message for all this time. So that's an issue for that committee to kind of have to wrestle with and to make sure they understand their charge. Kind of going forward, because the deadline is June 30th, the one positive that came out of that meeting was they said they don't mind doing multiple surveys. So
you mean they mind taking them?
They said they wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Taking a multiple surveys. They would rather have a survey that is more specific to administrators. So I will talk with administrators. And building specific. So I will talk with administrators and speak to them, just like the teachers. The teachers are deciding the survey. I'd like the administrators to have, and they've had conversations about the school climate survey, so they were party to that. They pitched on the table. I shared that feedback to the policy committee when we edited it and built that. So we'll take that extra step to do that. And whether or not you use that survey or you want us to do another one to staff, that's up to you. That's a step.
We don't want to. We just want to.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So I think that.
I mean, I think. I'm sorry. Finish because I just.
No, but I just want to make sure that the school committee takes the extra step of maybe stating that they want to use the school climate survey as a piece of evidence as you reflect on those standards, although they're not quite aligned, but I could easily show you how they are aligned. You could use that feedback as ways to answer those questions. I think that tool would be great.
I don't think it should be used as an evaluation tool because it wasn't built that way. And
I think it can be used anecdotally.
Anecdotally
is
fine.
It can be used anecdotally, and it's not an either-or thing. I mean, we're not taking one away from the other.
Exactly. There are other pieces of evidence that people are going to look at. Absolutely.
Okay, but as long as we all agree that that survey is not to be used for an evaluation, and that's not that
is not anybody's single evaluation tool. Absolutely.
Nor should it have much weight because the questions are like softball questions. We just want to know generally, are things good, and if
and what it's more for is a year over year.
Right.
When we developed a survey, it was for this particular one was as long as it is because we want to develop a baseline for gathering information year over year, and so we can start to see trends.
Right.
Which actually is
So
helpful in
so-
evaluation.
So are you unhappy about something?
No, why?
Okay. Well, I'm just trying
You
to figure out
disagree
where,
all the time.
where we are, that's all. I'm just making sure that.
It was a good meeting.
No,
I
it was
think
a- it was a-
clarified some
yes.
things for the
It was
teachers.
confusing at first because we didn't know what the heck was going on, but then.
But I don't think they did
I don't
either.
think
It was-
we
it's actually
understood
kind of
the,
sweet.
yeah, I don't think we understood the state tools. We weren't, because why would we, right? We wouldn't get involved in that, and I don't want to be involved in that. But I think what I'm looking for is an understanding and agreement that the school climate survey is not used as a substantive evaluation tool. If you want to use it, anecdotally,
Or as
that's
evidence.
fine, but I don't want it to be formalized because that's not how it was written, that's not the goal of it. It would be
I
not
don't-
fair to the person being reviewed.
I
Do you vote for
totally
it?
agree with that.
Okay.
Yes, that would be great.
Make a motion.
Make a motion, what do I move?
What are
I
you
don't know.
moving? We're not, we're actually not voting on anything though.
Well, that was the question. Do we need a vote to
You don't
make
need
it?
a vote.
We need
No.
to go. All right.
This is just a subcommittee update.
But everybody understands and agrees.
All right, another,
Okay.
I have a clarification. So the teachers are making the teacher survey?
So they are party to it. It's a committee of teachers and administrators, and they are party to the survey that students are going to take.
So there's no conflict of interest as far as, I mean, this is for the students to take for the teachers?
For the teachers that are in
To
their
review the
class.
teachers?
Right,
Theirs is, yeah.
yeah.
I didn't.
We have nothing to do with
No, I understand that, but initially they, you know, when the conversation started, it was administrators and then it was teachers. So I just,
It's,
but yeah, and
See, now you're confused.
well, that's when I got confused. The question that I had was, I thought it was a conflict of interest, like you can't write your own survey.
Oh,
So how is it the teachers can write their survey?
so we're not starting from scratch. There's a very good survey that the state has given as a model to everybody, every district.
But I'd be afraid they'd be leading questions.
Actually, I think they're harder, they're more aware of those kinds of things and want to make sure that they aren't leading questions.
Because
And they
these-
want to have, you want them to have buy-in
Good
to
feedback,
it.
exactly.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, basically this, if I understood correctly when I was doing it earlier, was this survey, when it comes back, is gonna show where teachers are deficient and they've got 2
No.
years to turn it around.
No, it's not that depth of a survey. It's a student perception survey, I guess would be the best way
So
to.
it's the students in the aggregate?
Right.
Oh.
It's,
Yeah,
and the,
yeah.
yeah.
And what are they trying, they're just trying to find out what?
So the
I have
purpose
a question, I'm sorry, are they evaluating individual teachers or just the atmosphere of the whole school?
they're evaluating individual teachers. So like when you went to college, you got an evaluation tool at the end of the course. That's the kind of thing that we're moving towards for students, for grades 3 through 12.
So they
Very
can
well
evaluate
educated.
every teacher.
And it's something that is now mandated by.
Is now
Yeah.
mandated. Yeah.
But the purpose of it is for what?
It is, the purpose of it, the survey data is to
From
contribute,
students.
from the students, is to contribute back to the teacher so that they can build goals on areas where there appears to be continued weakness.
Excuse me.
But as a parent, I mean, my weakness would, the weakness I would see is in the grades. And so there's like an obvious weakness, like this child isn't learning. All right, and are they not learning because the teaching is bad, or are they not learning because the kid's just not getting it? You know, well,
So that's,
it's a
there
combination.
are
So-
questions like that on the survey.
So is that contributing to that fraction where if we have an ineffective teacher, that they will be trained and if it doesn't turn around? Is that part of that, or is that
Yes.
a totally different survey?
Nope, that would contribute to the evaluation process, which might include now going through the needs improvement process and to a process where they, if they don't meet guidelines, then they would be terminated.
Okay, so who approves the survey?
The committee is working to approve it.
That survey, not, all right.
I'm not even talking about your survey,
Good,
anymore. Yours is done.
Ours is done.
I guess my
Can we
concern
keep
is, I'm back to, isn't that a conflict of interest?
Well, no, because you're having a team of representative peers work on it. I don't,
It's a group,
I'm not gonna
it's
get
a group
involved in this.
project.
I mean, I worked on the
just-
survey, the school climate survey, and I'm gonna take it.
But that's a general survey going out to everybody,
Mhm.
and it's owned by the school committee. So the school committee's got control. So those are, I mean, the ones they're working on, who has control of the survey?
That needs to be worked out. It's a good question. We haven't definitively talked about that, so we have to work those pieces out yet.
I mean, because I love the idea of recognizing issues with teaching and learning and fixing them.
Mhm.
I like that, but I actually see more of a conflict. I guess I don't know.
We'll bring that comment back to the full committee and talk about that more, so we can address that.
Because it's very easy, I mean, we've done a couple of them, and I know that a lot of times it comes up, it's a very main question, get rid of it.
And we're very sensitive to that, and I know the people on the committee have already spoken to that very thing. They feel this.
When does that committee meet again? It's monthly?
We meet monthly, I think it's next week.
Second.
2 weeks.
So maybe,
We can give you an update.
just give us an update on how that particular issue goes over with that group. That would be great. Good, Lynn? Okay.
will you guys, can we send you the link to the survey to take it, to edit it, to see if there's any issues with it and test it?
Sure.
So we'll send you that link.
Okay. Okay. Next is the superintendent's report.
So we talked about many different things. I guess the highlight here is we did address our roofs over the break. My compliments to our team, Bill, right down to our custodians. We did have to hire people to get them all done. We're crunching the numbers, but we are definitely around about $100,000, a little north of there. It is what it is. I think it was the right thing to do.
Total spent or over what we budgeted?
This is so we didn't budget anything for shoveling roofs, so this is a new cost.
So, well, I was thinking in terms of general
Yeah.
snow removal, so.
So when I wrote this, I did say, we are looking within our budget, and we will certainly report back where the money is going to come from within the existing budget. I did put down that I had hoped that we were going to look for MEMA for funds, but I don't know if it's today or tomorrow, but with the defunding of Homeland Security, which MEMA funds come out of, would mean that we probably won't get any funds from them anytime soon. I'll be meeting next week with the Luther Burbank staff to discuss the leadership profile for the next principal there. That opening is created by the retirement of Patrick Perkins. Our school van arrived. If you haven't seen it, it's at the high school. It's a white van, so you might not be able to see it. Because of the unforeseen snow, many of our parking lots are compromised. There's really nothing at this point that we can do, especially with this recent cold snap. So there are impacts. There are concerts that are being canceled and other things that are being rescheduled until parking becomes available. Each of our police departments have worked with the principals to do the best they can, but they need to make sure that staff, people who come to these events are safe, and especially pedestrians. So that's an important thing to remember. Because of the storms, MCAS windows have changed. We were allowed to change them, so they are being pushed back a week. It's going to, so you will see those calendars come up from the building principals. The Foundation Committee, which I'm a member, we had a hearing scheduled here originally on January 31st. It's got rescheduled to Saturday, February 28th. That's at Florence Sawyer School, though this time around. It's at 11 a.m. and I hope to see our town's boards and so forth represented to talk about certainly the funding issues for schools in general. Our coordinated program review went very well. We just got our ELL report back. We have a response to the report, but again, this was a very positive experience. We look at it as a great way an outside visitor coming in, much like NEASC, to come in and talk to us about where we need to make improvements and where we're doing really well. So that's it was nice to see such a positive report. So, I don't know why it says have a great vacation. But I think. So.
I do have a quick question about the MCAS dates. Is that for both March and May dates, or just the March?
It's for the March and May dates.
Okay.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah. So.
Any other questions? Michael? Okay, thank you. The citizens' comments, we've kind of been taking them all along, but any other citizens' comments?
I have more questions. On the vein of surveys, kind of a different angle on that. How frequently and whose responsibility is it to go into classrooms and do evaluations of teachers? Is that yours, Mr. Superintendent, or do the principals do that on?
Principals do that. I do have some teachers that I'm assigned to, so I do that, and I usually get into all the new teachers.
But just for clarification, that's been expanded.
That's been expanded.
Because the students are allowed to do it now?
No.
Well, the students are evaluating teachers, right, through the surveys? Huh?
Through the surveys.
Through the surveys. And
I'm
then-
referring actual in classroom.
Oh, okay.
Is it one visit per year per teacher? How does their policy? Or is that just random?
It varies now between 6 and 10 as the standard, and it can be more than that if it's required as part of their plan.
Okay. Moving on. Consent agenda. Nancy? Sorry.
Oh, I just had a comment. Just, I wanted to point out that George very helpfully illustrated in his memorandum that 2 of the towns' levy capacity will be surpassed by the request in this budget. And so they will be required to use free cash in order to meet the levy request. So that will cause some very interesting discussions at town meetings on the order of 2.5 proposition conversations. And I would suggest that the committee may want to bear that in mind as they look at their budget.
That's the past excess capacity, it's not the present year capacity. That's not the present year levy, that's excess capacity from past
Right,
years.
surpassed the excess levy.
And that doesn't, I don't think it's a proper interpretation, but I don't think it's significant enough to make a discussion of it.
Okay. Thank you. Consent agenda, warrants from February 27th, 2015, and minutes from February 11th, 2015. If there are no objections, consider them approved. Excellent. Items to be considered for next agenda. Anybody have anything that hasn't come up yet?
I just want to make sure, the special ed, when they're making the decision, because I really don't know how that works.
I'm going to have her schedule a meeting with you.
Okay, but I'm sure people want to hear too. But
Well,
this-
I'll have her do something for them, but I think it.
Okay, no, that's
might be-
good, because I just wanted to make sure that everyone's included, like, I know this is psychologist. Is guidance involved?
Well,
In an IEP.
in IEP,
Okay, so
very
they're
often
involved.
they are
Okay, so-
involved. They're part
Yeah,
of the
just
team.
kind of how that all works.
Yep.
I don't even know. I'll let you know.
Okay, then we have an executive session scheduled. I don't think it will take very long. A motion?
I move.
Objection.
What everyone wants me to do.
Yeah.
I know your minds. That we move to executive session for the purpose of discussing possible litigation, and that in addition to the school committee, that our executive session includes Superintendent Wood, Assistant Superintendent King, and Administrative Assistant Alina Masterson, and at the conclusion of our executive session, we will return to regular session for the sole purpose of adjourning the meeting, and no further business will be conducted at that time.
This is me, my reach.
You looking for a second on that?
Yes, dear?
Okay, roll call. Lynn?
Sure.
Oh, yes.
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 Thing to say no, can I leave?
No.
Are we off?
You can't.